Is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Fire is catching, and if we burn, you burn with us. It's The Hunger Games Mockingjay, Part 1, and this film is lit. Hello, and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. We're in the end game. It is Part 1 of our Mockingjay finale duology, I guess. I don't know, for lack of a better word. We're in our summer series. We're wrapping up The Hunger Games. Katie explained it in the last episode, but we're doing Mockingjay Part 1 this week, and then in 1 week's time, exactly 1 week, we won't have a prequel episode on that normal, when we normally would next Wednesday. You will get Mockingjay Part 2, and there will be a little short prequel episode out sometime in between now and next Wednesday. So we're going to get right into it. We got a lot to talk about. Not quite. I don't think this episode will quite be the, borderline 4 hours that, or full 4 hours that the Catching Fire episode was. It's because we're splitting a book in half. We don't have quite as many notes for each one, but we do have quite a bit to talk about. So let's get right into our first segment. Let me sum up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
After being rescued from the 75th Hunger Games arena, Katniss Everdeen finds herself hidden away in secretive District 13, where they've managed to elude Capitol control. But her problems are far from over. Peeta was captured and is in the Capitol's clutches, District 12 has been bombed into nothing, and the leadership of District 13 wants Katniss to be the face of the rebellion, the Mockingjay. But Katniss doesn't trust them or their motivations. Katniss finally agrees to be the Mockingjay, but is put off by having to play a role on a stage where so many lives hang in the balance. Nonetheless, the rebellion builds to a tipping point, and the Capitol ultimately launches an attack directly on District 13. Following that, District 13 decides to undertake a covert operation to rescue Peeta and a few other former tributes from the Capitol. But Peeta is not the boy he used to be. After he attacks Katniss, it's revealed that the Capitol hijacked him to turn him against Katniss and her mission.
All right, that is the first half, about the first 180 or so pages of Mockingjay. It's like literally exactly the halfway mark.
It is.
It's pretty much right in the middle. But yeah, so that's Mockingjay. If you haven't read or watched, you got a little bit of a frame of reference. But we're going to get into our main segments for these summer series episodes, and that always starts with Better in the Book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
So starting right in, at the beginning of the film, we open up on a scene with Katniss in the hallway, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at some point. But I wish, and when I was reading this book, the book opens up with her walking through the ashes of District 12. Mm-hmm. And I was envisioning that being the opening shot of the movie, being like Katniss standing in this vast, devastated landscape, and it being such a striking visual way to open your film that I thought it would be the way to do it. And I was for sure that was how they were going to open the movie. And when they didn't, I was a little disappointed. Basically, the movie does open up the same way as the book, in the sense that in the book, we get Katniss going back and talking us through some of the things that have happened. Like she sort of recaps some events that have happened since the end of the last book. And those events she recaps is what the movie shows us first, basically. Like her at District 13, her becoming a little bit accustomed to it, meeting President Coin, all that stuff. And I get it, and it makes sense, but I really did like the idea of opening up with that stark, striking devastation of District 12 as like the opening shot of the film.
I agree. I thought they might start with that and then maybe like pop back.
Like the book, do what the book does, basically.
And I didn't mind the movie's tactic of starting out with like almost like a creepy, unsettling mystery. Because we start on like a very close in shot of her. And
hiding.
she's hiding and she's in a very panicked state. So especially if you don't remember a lot about the end of the last movie, that's kind of an opening like, oh my gosh, where is she? What's going on?
Yeah, and even if you do, you could think, oh, something's happened. What's, you don't know what's going on.
And I don't mind that, but post that initial like unsettlingness, I thought the beginning of this movie was kind of boring.
I agree.
Then like I get needing to introduce everything because once again we don't have the benefit of being in Katniss's thoughts like we do in the book, but it was a whole lot of exposition to start this movie off.
There is a ton of exposition at the beginning, and I think it would have worked better, I think, to start with the opening shot with her in 12 and then kind of like bring the camera into her face as she's and then jump back to District 13, do some, I don't know, because they haven't used flashbacks really from my memory in any of the movies, so I'm sure they didn't want to start like doing flashbacks, but I think there would have been a way to do it that would have just been a more interesting opening. Not that her walking around District 12 is particularly exciting, but it's at least there's a lot of storytelling and stuff happening visually as opposed to expositionally and dialogue heavy.
Yes.
When she's walking through 12, like we see the wreckage of, the town and the skulls. And then we see, she goes to the Victor's Village and her old house and collects stuff. And like all that is like visual stuff that is at least a little more compelling than people sitting in rooms talking, which is a lot of what we get at the beginning of the movie. So I think it could have been a slightly more successful open to the film than the way they did. Other than that very first moment is an interesting hook. Like it's at least a little bit intriguing. Speaking of District 13, I really wish they had set up District 13 more in the movies. It's in this movie we get there and it's just we've never heard of it. I mean, I'm sure it's been mentioned once.
Well, I think it's been mentioned in the movies, but we get a lot of setup in the book Catching Fire.
Yeah.
For District 13 that we just get none of in the movie.
Because they cut the entire Bonnie and Twill plot line from Catching Fire where they're on their way there and they have backstory and the whole thing with the footage being, like this setting up this mystery of, is there something in 13? All of that is sort of just dumped on your doorstep immediately at the beginning of this movie without much groundwork being laid. And I thought that was a little kind of just a missed opportunity to set that up a little bit more. I also thought the book just gives a little bit more interesting sort of backstory. The movie does an okay job of sort of piecemealing this through sort of context over the course of the movie. But like in the book, we find out how they were able to survive in 13 with because they had nukes and sort of mutually assured destruction, and they all went underground. And then we get more information about like that the fact that they're all infertile because of this pox that happened a few years ago. And the pox is mentioned in the movie, but it's just like they mentioned it's an epidemic that killed off a bunch of kids. I just thought there was a little bit more information about 13 that would have helped ground the sort of the setting of where most of this movie takes place.
Right. Well, and I guess when they were piecing together the script for Catching Fire, they felt like it was a risk they were willing to take, like not really setting this up, because surely like they knew, right? Because the books had already come out.
By the time Catching Fire was being made, I'm pretty sure it was out. And Suzanne Collins, if at the very least, was involved in the production, she would have known it. It's not like this, it's not even like a George R.R. Martin situation where like have no idea, hasn't written it, it's like still figuring it out.
So I guess they just felt comfortable that they would be able to accomplish this in the Mockingjay films, but I'm not sure it worked for me. It works as, again, having read the books, it works. I'm not sure how well it works. Not having read the books.
Not having read the books, I guess, would be my biggest
I agree.
issue.
So Katniss eventually does go to District 12, in the movie. It's not where we start, but she does eventually go see it. And it, like I said and let me sum up, it has been bombed to basically nothing.
Yeah.
And one thing that we see in the book that we don't see in the movie is her at her old house.
Her old house before
they went
like
and
her
lived
childhood
in,
home.
Yeah,
that she
her
grew up
childhood
in.
home, like the little hovel
Yeah.
that they lived in. And the movie doesn't try to show it. Maybe they thought we wouldn't recognize it.
To be fair, yeah, I don't know how you would necessarily recognize it because it is all bombed out.
Right. Well, and we don't really see it in Catching Fire.
No.
Either.
No.
So we haven't seen it since the beginning of
No, they don't make a
movie
particular
1.
point of it at anything. And there's definitely nothing distinguishing about it that would make it visually stand out. We know that she's there in the book because we're in her head. But in the movie, I don't know how we would know unless she found something that, made it obvious in the rubble, which they could have done. But yeah.
Yeah.
There's a line in the book as she's walking through District 12 that I was thinking they may try to work in somehow having her say it or some version of it to somebody on the intercom or something. Because it's a really striking line in the book that stuck out to me. And it's in her head in the book. As she's walking through District 12, she thinks, it's not wondering what I breathe in, but who that threatens to choke me. And that's just a horrifying line. And I thought they might try to figure out a way to use that. Yeah. Like, again, have her say it to Gale on the comm. Like, not that exact line, but something with it. But they don't, and that's fine. We also find out that a little bit in the book about what happened to Bonnie and Twill. Obviously, Bonnie and Twill weren't mentioned in the movie, the second movie, so there's no reason to. But we find out that they most likely died trying to get the 13, at least as far as we know. Yeah. Halfway through the book, unless they show up later, which I guess is possible. And she was, they were somewhere else hiding out and make it to 13 eventually. But they're not in 13, so she assumes they died.
So back to the subject of District 13. I do want to talk about that a little bit because the movie made some, and not really changes, but they did leave some stuff out.
Yeah, it's not so much changes as it is omissions of details, I guess. Yeah. Which,
and some of the details...
We're going to talk about this here. I have a lot of notes about this. Yes, and this is as good a place as any to talk about it. So
we missed some of the more dystopian details about District 13 in the movie. There was a note that I made as I was reading the book was like, District 13 is just a different flavor of dystopia than the rest of this world is. Yes. So, things like they get these daily schedules. Yeah. They basically get like a temporary tattoo on their arm every day.
Tattoo on their inner forearm. Yeah. Which will,
that schedules out like their entire day.
Their entire day.
Every minute.
Yeah, every moment. There's one little joke I like where they have like at 1800 hours, she has reflection, which is just like sit and think. Just
quiet time.
Quiet time, yeah.
And then another thing that gets left out is how strict they are about food in District 13.
And everything. They're just, food specifically, but all kinds of stuff. They're very not wasteful. They're very, what is the word?
They're, frugal, I guess you could say.
Yeah, there's a word for it, but yeah.
They don't waste anything in District 13.
Yeah. I had a lot of feelings about the whole characterization of District 13. I had a lot of this better in the movie in that I liked that it's tough because I think that those details create a more well-realized setting.
And that's why I had it here.
And that's fair. I also almost had it here, too.
The world building, even though I think I share some of your concerns that you'll get to in a minute here, the world building is one of my favorite things about this series. And I think that the world building that got left out of the movie does create a more fully realized and interesting world for
Yes.
District 13, especially like, you know, we mentioned like, oh, they don't like to waste stuff and they're really strict about food, which is kind of dystopian, but also makes perfect sense
Yeah.
when you consider how this society has evolved
Yes, absolutely.
and like what they're working with.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. Yeah. And I think that's what is most successful about it is a lot of the things about District 13 are things that make a lot of sense. And I also had a tough time deciding whether to put this in better in the movie or better in the book, because I agree that it makes a much richer setting. It creates just a more realized and engaging universe and to kind of sink your teeth into. And so I did enjoy that about the book. My issue and why I put it in better in the movie, and I talked about this a little bit on our Patreon, on one of the comments on Patreon, is that this is where it's mostly in the first 50 pages of the book where we're doing the setup of District 13. You talked about the food, not wasting any of the food. Specifically, on top of not wasting it, the food is repeatedly referenced as being really bland and terrible, and like mush and blah blah blah. Fulvia at one point, who's not a character in the movie, but she's the assistant for Plutarch. She like wastes a piece of paper, like crumples it up and throws it away because they're from the capital and she's not used to them. You know how they do things in 13, and everybody's like glares at her, and gives her,
it gets like an extreme reaction.
Yeah, from like throwing away a piece of paper that she only used a little bit of and that sort of thing. Katniss has shoes that have been reissued to her. Somebody else didn't need them anymore, whatever, died, who knows. And so she has shoes that don't quite fit her.
Yeah.
They're a little too big for her.
Been worn in by somebody else.
Yeah, or that's even that. It's not even that they don't fit. It's that, they've just been worn in by somebody else, and so they don't quite fit right and that sort of thing. And so I agree that all that stuff are things that make sense for this society in District 13, living underground with minimal resources, trying to do stuff. I can't help but find it a little annoying because it plays into a lot of like fairly cliche, this is socialism and it sucks tropes.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear when you read the world building of District 13 that this is Suzanne Collins writing a socialist dystopia, like society, dystopian society. At least that's what it feels like to me. And I felt like that while I get what she's going for, and ultimately the whole message of these books are about, and especially it's tough to, because I don't want to spoil things for the second half of the book because you haven't read it yet and where things go. But we're very clearly, even in the first half of the book, Katniss does not like District 13.
No, not at all.
She's not happy to be there. She doesn't like the way they do things. And one of the big things about that is that she numerous times, and this is another thing they drop from the movie, is we hear her talk about how, sure, in 13 we're not under the boot of the capital, but they have all these rules, and it's this authoritarianism in 13 versus the freedom, and she even references it as freedom in District 12.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time with this. I had a hard time dealing with this sort of cartoonist characterization of a leftist civilization or of a socialist civilization, and it just felt like so ultimately the point of the story is power is bad and the people who seek power don't trust them, kind of is like the overarching point. And I agree with that to an extent. I think even that is an overly simple way to look at things. I think it's a lot more complicated than people who seek power are bad. There are plenty of people who seek power to do good. And sure, that can be corrupting and it can be bad, and you should always be on the lookout for that. But I don't think it's inherently, I could be, I don't know. It's a very deep, complicated philosophical topic. We're not going to go into all the nuances of, but just sort of the blanket idea of like, don't trust anybody, who seeks power, blah, blah, blah. They're all out for their own ends, and it all ends in the same sort of authoritarian nightmare, regardless of what end of the political spectrum it is, I think is not wrong, but also boring. Like, maybe boring's not even the right word. It's just, my biggest problem is that I feel like in an attempt to sort of do this, and I hesitate to call it both sidesing, because she's not really both sidesing, but in an attempt to sort of very specifically highlight the idea that power and the people who seek it are bad and not to be trusted, and that freedom is good. I think she has a lot of collateral damage on like the idea of leftism. And I think especially for young readers, I think seeing this sort of collectivist society, and the and again, I don't even agree. I don't agree with a lot of what 13 does. I think it obviously is a lot of the things they do are a little overboard, are kind of authoritarian and bad. Like,
yeah.
I mean, and one of the things I thought was a good idea was dropping the whole
the schedule
tattooed on your forearm. I was like, excuse me, Suzanne Collins, there's a very specific historical reference point you're making there, and I don't know if that's exactly the right comparison you want to be making here. Like there are times to make allusions to the Holocaust in order to like drive your point home, for sure. I don't know if the sort of socialist rigor and like commitment to like organization is the parallel like to the Holocaust that you want. I don't know. I found that really weird, because again, tattooing your inner arm is a very specific and thing to put in your book.
And that specific detail too bugged me for that reason, but also because I didn't feel like it made sense in the same way that their like frugality did. To me, that was a very like kind of melodramatic and almost maudlin detail to throw in. Yeah.
It's one of those things again where I think in an attempt to make, because the some of the more like the frugality of District 13 and their waste not want not perspective all makes sense. I think in order to drive home that no, you shouldn't like there are things off about this District 13. It's not, you know, this wonderful utopia that you might have hoped it was. She has to put in things like tattooing your schedule in your inner arm and it being dictated down to the minute, you know, because that's how they operate. And that's also one of those things that just doesn't really make sense that would be necessary. Like, obviously it runs kind of like a military, because they are like a militarized society because they have to be in the situation they're in. But, you know, that like down to the second, this is when you have time to reflect. This is when you eat. This is, you know, that doesn't really even make sense within, like, even in the military, they have on hours, you know, where they're doing X things, and then they have off hours. And in those off hours, it's not like from this time to this time you eat. I mean, obviously the food is regulated based on like when the meals are served, if you're on like a ship or something, but like, or a base or whatever. But like, oh, this is when you read, this is when you sleep. Like, again, I think even then it gets it's this like sort of over the top depiction of a sort of authoritarian system that felt unbelievable because it didn't feel super practical for what their situation was. But also, again, you cannot miss reading this book all of the allusions to that this is what socialism is. This is communism, and this sucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, there are problems with every political and financial organizational system, but I just feel like it was a little. I found it disappointing that that was the angle that she took in order to characterize 13 as bad. Now, again, the things that are worst about 13 is the authoritarianism, which I agree is bad. Like that, I'm not a fan of authoritarianism, and the fact that those are the things that are worst about it. And even Katniss sees the pros and cons of all these things, and it's not. I don't want to paint it as like this completely like one-sided portrayal, because it's not. But I think there is collateral damage to the idea of socialism, of leftist political organizing that the book sort of paints broadly upon, and especially for younger audiences, they might not be able to discern quite so well. I don't know. I just found it like a little meh.
Well, and it's something that I kind of wish that the book would have done, and I don't know if this would have helped, But we see District 13 through Katniss, obviously, who, while living most of her life in District 12, did have, like, relative freedom.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
poor as dirt.
Yeah.
Sure. But for most of her time there, District 12 kind of flew under the radar of the Capitol.
Yes, compared to other districts.
Yeah, compared to other
yeah.
districts. And I would have liked to get a glimpse of District 13 from the viewpoint of somebody from, let's say, District 11.
Yeah.
Where when we saw District 11 in the previous book, it's incredibly authoritarian.
Oh, yeah. It's
like constantly patrolled, and the huge walls and fences.
And beatings and people getting whipped in the square and all that sort of thing. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. And because there is a line specifically that Katniss has in the book that really drove me crazy, because I think it kind of cuts to the core of what I found most just sort of disappointing about what we're seemingly supposed to get out of Katniss's experience in 13. And she says this: in some ways, District 13 is even more controlling than the Capitol. And sure, in some ways. Mm-hmm. But the thing that really stuck out to me is she's admiring the freedom she had in 12, because she could sneak under the wall. She could break the rules and sneak under the wall and go spend all the day in the forest and hunt and blah, blah, blah. But, and to her, that's freedom. And I understand that. But it's also, I think what we're seeing here is a problem, sort of, and a thing that people do a lot, is distinguishing between, like, what freedom even means. So, like, sure, in 12 she was free, but was also free to starve to death. Yeah. Like, she had, like, and that's you know, one of the things that's really tough when you look at any sort of like, even take America, for example, take the United States. Very free country, relatively speaking, like, compared to a lot of, like, we're in the top, you know, whatever, 30th percentile or something. I don't know what it is. There are plenty of freer countries, spoilers, but there are also countries that are, like, you know, many more that are less free in terms of, like, legally and, like, how it's organized politically. But there is, we take for granted the idea that, I guess the thing that I think I would like people to think on is, are you really free if you live in a society like in 12 where you have to work under the boot of the capital structure that exists, literally the capital structure. Yeah. Both with an A and an O. I think it's spelled with an O in the book. In order to, like, eat or have a house to live in, you are free to do whatever you want. But if you stop doing those things, if you stop, if you stop working within the system, you die. Yeah. Because you don't have food. And so there is, obviously 13 takes that in a different way, like, because you're scheduled down to every minute, but you are provided for. And so ideally there's something in the middle. It's, again, there's a system that combines the best aspects of both that freedom of sort of that more libertarian freedom that she had in 12 with the sort of more socialist freedom of 13, where she had all of her needs provided for to some extent, and that sort of thing. And I don't know. I found the whole messaging sort of thematically around 13 to reinforce a lot of, like, old tropes about anything short of, like, or anything bordering on socialism, as, like, yep, the food sucks, it's all gruel, your shoes don't fit, everything's gray, wears the same gray everything's jumpsuit. Gray. Yeah, you know, it's just like, okay, yeah, you know, it's such a, like, to me, again, it's kind of why I called it boring at one point. To me, it's just sort of a boring, played out. Yeah, it's not a very interesting portrayal of this kind of society. Yeah, and I don't know. So that was my whole thing. And that is why, like, I would have been very interested to see it through the eyes of somebody from a district like 11, because I doubt somebody from District 11 would be out here saying, well, in some ways, these guys are even more controlling than the Capitol. Or even somebody from 12 who didn't have the privilege Katniss had to know how to hunt and know how to, go out in the woods. And, like, there's plenty of people in 12. She talks about it in the first book who starved to death all the time. Her family never starves to death because she knows how to hunt and has a bow and can go out in the woods. There's tons of people who can't, and to them, is their freedom in 12, was their freedom in 12 way better than, you know, this in 13? I don't know. It is for you. All I'm saying is Katniss Everdeen needs to check her privilege.
She needs to check her privilege.
That's all I'm saying. Anyways.
And speaking of her privilege too, we talked about the schedules, but we never see any kind of repercussion on her for like she blows off her schedule all the time in the first half of this book.
I think we're to think that it's because
it's her. Yeah. I think we are to think that. But also, like, we never see any repercussions for that.
We never see any repercussions for anybody for that. I mean, the only thing we see is, and we'll get to it very shortly, is the repercussions to, like, people from the Capitol who showed up, who her prep team, who stole bread or something. But that was, like, stealing, and they got, you know, punished for it. We don't know if people get punished for not perfectly following
don't know about
the schedule or whatever. You would assume they do because it's tattooed on your arm, but who knows? And it was at this point I was like, I'm beginning to think, because the first couple books I'm like, Suzanne Collins, all right, Comrade Suzanne Collins. And we get to this book, I'm like, wait a second, no, she's an Anne Prim. Oh God, like and if you don't know Anne, and I don't know if that's what I think it probably is, which is why I've never heard anything from her. Like, since she put out her book, she just disappeared. She's not on Twitter. She's not doing right. She doesn't do anything. She's probably just living in a cabin in the woods. I'm like convinced. So an Anne Prim is an anarchist primitivist. Or I don't know exactly. It's an anarchist primitivism or whatever. Essentially, people anarchists who want who think the most sort of stable and effective form of society is a more primitive, like go it's jokingly on the internet called like go back to monkey or whatever, where it's like sort of roughly, you know, back when we were like hunter gatherers, you know, thousands of years ago in small little like, you know,
like
tribal groups. That's kind of what Anne Prims think is like peak society and like the way it's sort of best organized. And I'm woefully under explaining Anne Prim. I understand if you're an Anne Prim, you listen. I know I'm not explaining it well. I'm just saying. And so I was thinking, oh, that feels like what? Because that's what Katniss just wants to go live in the woods and hunt.
Yeah.
And like, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to do that, go for it. I get it. Like, there's times we talked about it in the Hatchet episode where it's like there's times where that sounds real appealing.
Sounds very appealing.
And so I understand that. But in terms of organizing society, I'm not sure. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not the most effective way to organize your society. But anyways, it's like, oh, okay, she's an Anne Prim. Cool. All right, fair enough. And like I said, I the fact that she's not on Twitter, she doesn't do anything. I'm just like, she probably is just living. She bought a giant mansion in the middle of the woods and is just living life. Good for you, Suzanne Collins.
She wrote her books and went off the grid.
Yep. Good for you. So we've established that Katniss has no love for District 13, and she doesn't trust a lot of the people there, and she's sort of conflicted about, she doesn't really want to be the Mockingjay. This is a situation that's been thrust on her. But we do have a moment in the book, and we get this in the movie as well, but I thought it was maybe a little bit better handled in the book. But we do get a similar idea in the film where she sort of is reminded of the horrors committed by the Capitol, and this renews her commitment and her desire to fight. And I think one of the things that I thought was really effective upon this reading of the book is the fickle nature of a teenager and how quickly and I mean of anybody, that's not even just teenagers, but in particular when you're younger, it's even more exaggerated, how quickly sort of the motivations of a teenager can, like, because, you know, she hates District 13 and it's dumb and she just wants to run away, but then it's like, oh no, I hate snow, you know. Like, I thought that the book did a pretty good job of depicting a realistic feeling turmoil within Katniss that drives her motivations in different directions all the time, and she's never, you know, at one point she wants nothing to do with the rebellion, the next moment she like wants to go hunt snow down herself, and other times she actually is, you know, and the snow thing is a little bit more personal, like sort of revenge motivated, but there is a part of her that she gets at times where it is more sort of her motivations are like grander and in terms of like liberating the society at large and helping people in the other districts and that sort of thing. And so I just thought I liked that, and I'm not sure that comes across in the movie as well. I think it does because we see her voicing different feelings at different times in the movie, but since we're in her head in the book, I think it's just really clear how quickly and often her motivations and desires change. I also, so she says this line in the movie when she does decide she wants to be the Mockingjay. In the movie, she goes, we cut, she's reminded of, this is after District 12, I guess, or something like, I can't remember when this happens, after she visits District 12, maybe. I don't remember when it happens in the movie. In the book, her and Gale are talking, and they're thinking, I don't even remember what they're talking about, but they have a conversation, and something in the conversation riles her up to get her to decide that she wants to be the Mockingjay. And in the movie, it just cuts to her in the room with Plutarch and Coin and says, I'll be your Mockingjay. And in the book, it's essentially the same. There's a slight change in that Gale asks her what she's going to do, and she says, I'm going to be the Mockingjay. And I really liked her saying that out loud to herself and Gale first.
Yeah, kind of trying it on.
Yeah, sort of trying it on, trying to kind of convincing herself and like seeing how it sounds when she says it versus just jumping right in and saying it to the people who are going to put those plans in motion. I thought I liked, it's a little detail. It doesn't really matter, but I slightly preferred the book where she says it kind of to herself first.
So in both the book and the movie, she agrees to be the Mockingjay on a couple of conditions. And that's like mostly the same book to movie. But there is one thing that didn't make it to the movie, which was that one of her conditions was that she ultimately gets to kill President Snow.
Yeah.
Which she does not say in the movie.
Not that I recall, no.
No. And I was wondering, because I don't know how important that's going to be in the second half of the book. I guess not particularly important since they felt comfortable leaving it out.
I can't talk about that because that moment where that decision comes is very spoiler heavy.
Okay.
So
Okay.
incredibly like big spoilers.
Okay, well that makes that even more interesting to me that they left that condition out of the movie then. But I was also kind of sad to lose one of President Coin's lines in that moment. When Katniss says that one of her conditions is that she wants to kill Snow, and Coin responds, when the time comes, I'll flip you for it.
I thought that's a good line.
Yeah.
That's a nice little moment for Coin. I like that too. I think the other condition she doesn't make in the movie is about the cat, maybe? Or does she say that?
I don't think it's one of her conditions. I think they had already kind of settled because the initial agreement with the cat was that they gave him like a little window
In the book.
So in the book, yeah, so that he could go in and out.
But but that was after she made the agreement with them. Yes.
Was it?
Yes, 100%. She makes the agreement and they go, yeah, okay, but because at first they're like, no.
Yeah.
And she says, okay, well, maybe it was before this. But
don't
either way,
remember.
at one point she has to make a deal with them to keep the cat.
Right.
And the movie cuts that out and they just seem to let her keep the cat without any issues. And I thought that was another thing going back to our previous long discussion about the movie toning down the authoritarianism of 13 a little bit from what we get in the book. Because in the book they're like, no, you can't have a pet. No pets. Yeah. And it's just not even mentioned in the movie. It's just like fine, it seems like.
Well, she does in the movie say that one of her conditions is that her sister gets to keep
does
a cat.
It? Okay, that's what I was asking.
But I can't remember if that was specifically part of her conditions in the book.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
No, it is. I knew it was in the book. I thought I missed it in the movie in that part because I was writing on the notes. I didn't realize she asked in the movie. I thought she dropped it. So she does ask in the movie. About the cat. She does request it.
She does say that my sister gets to keep her cat.
Well, then never mind. They did keep that part.
Yeah. There's a lot less detail around how the cat lives
right, yeah,
in
they're not worried about like
in the movie.
Yeah, because in the book it's like it's got a window, it's got to be in by a certain time. I'm like, how are you getting a cat in by a certain time? What does that even mean? Yeah, I thought that was silly. They're like, if the cat's not in by 0800 every night, we're gonna kill it. It's like, what? I can't make it come back.
He just doesn't get to come in at that point, which I guess the cat would figure it out eventually.
Yeah.
That it needs to come back by like dinner time or whatever.
I thought that was silly. But anyways, during this conversation, there's another little moment in the book right after she agrees to be the Mockingjay. And she says, you got to pardon Peter or whatever. And they start having this discussion in the book about, oh yeah, we got to stay with the PETA relation. They basically, Plutarch and Fulvia and stuff start talking about what relationship makes the most sense for
Yeah.
To keep Katniss in, quote unquote, for the cause, basically. And I thought that was, again, I like that element of District 13 also using propaganda in the same way that the Capitol does. I don't disagree with. I think that is a very poignant political, regardless of any of the other feelings I have about
it's all marketing.
Yeah,
No matter where you go,
because everything's marketing.
It's the old razzle dazzle.
Yeah, and I did like them kind of discussing like, no, yeah, well, we can't ever be with Gale because everything's just blah, blah, blah. Like it makes the most sense. She's still with Peeta, and they were like, I like that. And again, all without her like really caring what her input on this is.
Yeah, they just discuss it in front of her.
Yeah.
Don't ask her how she feels about it.
Speaking of Fulvia and the prep team, there was a scene that I thought was interesting in the book. So I think I prefer that this is cut out in relation to my previous point about sort of toning down the authoritarianism of 13. But I did like this in the book because I like these characters, and there's particularly a couple little moments, and that is Katniss's prep team is in the book from the Capitol. They've made their way to 13, or no, they were rescued. I can't remember now.
They like plucked them out of the Capitol at Cinna's request.
Yeah.
Like the same night that everything went down in the arena, it sounded like. So I guess they did kind of kidnap them from the Capitol.
Yeah. So they brought her prep team there, who's not been in any of the movies. Well, they have, but not like named characters.
Yeah, they're not like characters the way they are in the books.
And we find out that they're there, but they were being like tortured in the basement or they were locked up in the basement, and they're all like seemingly being tortured because they got in trouble for stealing bread or something like that. And I think the implication is that some members of 13 are being sort of vindictive to some of the Capitol residents. Even though they're part of District 13 now, probably like a native District 13 member wouldn't get thrown in the dungeon for stealing a piece of bread, probably. But a Capitol person they do, or some Capitol people they do. So I liked bringing them back, and then I also like the element we get of that where Katniss is like defending them at one point, and Gale's like, "Why are you defending them? Like they're horrible. They were like prepping you to go die on camera. Like what?" And I like that dynamic of her, sort of trying to talk to him about why they're the way they are and that sort of thing like that. And then specifically, the thing I liked most about them is this one little scene that is just a really cute scene where they're all, after they rescue them from the dungeon, they're all like having dinner together. And Gale's sister sits down next to Octavia, and Octavia has green skin, I believe.
Yeah, her skin's like an evergreen
green,
color.
Yeah.
And Gale's sister is little.
Young, yeah. She's much
like
younger than
6
Prim.
or something.
Yeah, she's like a little kid. And she says to Octavia, "You're green. Are you sick?" And Octavia says no, I'm not sick. And I think either she or somebody else says,
Katniss explains that it's like using lipstick or something.
Yeah, people in the Capitol, they dye their skin different colors and things like that. And Gale's little sister says to her, "It's a fashion thing." This is Katniss. "You're green. Are you sick?" "It's a fashion thing, Posey, like wearing lipstick," I say. "It's meant to be pretty," whispers Octavia, and I can see the tears threatening to spill over her lashes. Posey considers this and says matter-of-factly, "I think you'd be pretty in any color." The tiniest of smiles forms on Octavia's lips. "Thank you." It's an adorable scene. It's a very cute little moment. And I was disappointed that wasn't in the movie. I had a feeling it wouldn't be because, again, the prep team hasn't really been a character.
Yeah, they hadn't really been in the movies the way that they are in the books. Yeah. So the movie cuts the prep team and the character of Fulvia, and what we get is Effie Trinket, who, at least up to this point, has not been in this book.
No.
I think they say at one point that they have no idea what happened to her.
Effie. Yeah.
So probably dead. But I liked subbing Effie in because that means we get more of Elizabeth Banks playing Effie.
Yeah.
But I do think that it really belies that definite decision to soften District 13. Like, you contrast what happens in the book with the prep team, like, literally locked in a dungeon, to the movie with Plutarch explicitly saying, "This door isn't locked, to Effie."
Yeah.
And then what we miss out on with Gale and Katniss is Gale's double standards, because he is very quick to defend Coin in District 13 because this is how they've always operated. But then in the same breath, he condemns her prep team for doing things the way that they've always operated.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it is interesting, now that I'm thinking about it, I have to be really careful about how I talk about this to avoid spoilers. One, I agree. I had better in the movie that replacing Fulvia with Effie, I thought was a good decision just because Elizabeth Banks is great in this and her Effie is great. And I think bringing her into this movie and giving her some more of a character arc is just more interesting.
And it continues what we start to see with her in the first two books as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes perfect sense, I think. I will say that it is interesting that that the movies seem to be slightly softening sort of District 13. Knowing, again, roughly from my memory, I'm only a couple chapters past where we stopped for this. I'm a couple chapters past where the end of the first movie is in reading. And from my memory, I think it's really interesting with where the story ends up that they would soften District 13 in the movies, knowing where the story is going. Seems like maybe a weird choice. Again, I don't want to go into any details, but it does potentially make the outcome of the story a little weirder. Maybe? I don't know.
I don't either.
I'll say this. A thing I like a lot of times in media is media that makes it clear, these books have done a lot of this, and we've talked about this a lot, that the individuals are not the problem, it's the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I worry that, although it's complicated, I like that, but I worry that with the way the movies are taking it, it's going to end up the messaging is going to be, no, it wasn't individuals that were the problem, not the system. But at the same time, I disagree with the way the system in the book, the system of District 13, I think is a cliche, sort of tropey, like weird portrayal of it. It's not unrealistic. It existed, Soviet Union existed. Like it's not outlandish that in fact, lots of authoritarian left-wing systems, it's complicated. But my point being, I don't know. I'm really interested to see if the softening of I guess my point is I'll be really interested to see if the softening of District 13 in the movie makes sense with where the second movie ends and what that means thematically for both District 13 and the overall rebellion and the sort of wider thematic implications of like systems versus individuals and what that all means. I'm interested to see where that goes with these slight changes. Anyways, sorry. It's hard because I don't want to go into details. And again, I barely remember the details, so it's not helpful either.
This is a little thing, but it is mentioned in the book that Greasy Say.
I don't know how to say her name.
I keep wanting to say Greasy Sal in my head because that sounds more like a name to me. But the cook from the Hob in District 12 now works in the kitchens at District 13, which I thought was a nice little detail.
It is. I was trying to pay attention and see, because we do see her in the movies several times in like the first two movies, and I was trying to pay attention and see if we saw that actress like
in the background
somewhere, and I don't think so, but I was also might have just missed it. I don't know.
So after agreeing to be the Mockingjay, Katniss goes to visit Beetee, which is how they say it in the movie, which I disagree with. I meant to talk about that in the last episode because I was pronouncing it BT.
Don't they?
In my head the
I feel
whole
like
time.
One person says BT in the movie. I feel like Coyne says BT.
I'm gonna say BT because I think I like that better than Beetee.
Yeah.
So she goes down to see BT in weapons.
Yeah.
He's working like in the weapons
armory,
department.
Basically, yeah.
He's like a tech whiz.
Yeah.
But we see in the book something that we don't get at all in the movie, which is like this giant fake meadow.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And I wonder if it goes anywhere in the second half of the book.
Yeah.
Because it does seem like a weird thing to mention. And then not use it all in any way. But yeah, he's in this giant meadow that is like they're growing, and it's like hummingbirds in the meadow and stuff. And I actually thought it would have been a really clever way to do like a twist edit by just cutting to Katniss in this field and then revealing that it's in District 13.
Yeah, that would have been
a fun
interesting.
little moment. But yeah, they cut that part out. It doesn't really matter, again, at least so far.
Yeah, I guess not. I'm interested, like you said, to see if it goes anywhere, if it means anything in the second half of the book. But they cut it out of the movie, which I was a little disappointed by because I thought it could have been neat.
I think it might, because I think so. One of the things they mentioned is that they're studying the hummingbirds because of how they fly, and I think that they may somehow they may come up with technology that allows people to fly or something.
Oh, do they reinvent drones?
I think they may reinvent. Well, like wingsuit, like I think I don't remember at all, but I think that might be how it comes back potentially. And maybe the movie decided that wasn't necessary. They just invent this thing. Like, they don't need a room full of, I don't know. Anyways, but he does give her his bow or her bow.
Yeah, she gets a sweet bow, which is sweeter in the book than it is in the movie.
Yeah, I had it in the movie. It's just a black bow that looks exactly like the silver one that the Capitol gave her, except it's black.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's so boring. Again, I was hoping we were finally going to get a cool prop. But in the book, it's described as having, I set the case flat on the floor and undo the latches along one side. The top opens on silent hinges. Inside the case on a bed of crushed maroon velvet lies a stunning black bow. I lift it carefully into the air to admire the exquisite balance, the elegant design, and the curve of the limbs that somehow suggests the wings of a bird extended in flight. There's something else. I have to hold very still to make sure I'm not imagining it. No, the bow is alive in my hands. I press it against my cheek and feel the slight hum travel through the bones of my face. What's it doing? I ask. Saying hello, explains BT with a grin. It heard your voice. It recognizes my voice, I ask. Only your voice.
Yeah. And we don't get the voice recognition thing in the movie.
No.
And I read that in the book and I was like, oh, that's going to be important.
Yeah. Again, because to be fair, to be fair to the movie cutting that, so far in the book, that has meant nothing.
True.
She's used the bow, and also I don't understand what it could mean. Like what it would do, the fact that it recognizes, because he doesn't even say like it won't fire. Like you know what I mean?
I would assume that would be the point of your weapon having voice recognition, right? Would be so that you can tell it not to fire if somebody else is using it.
Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't. But he doesn't go on to explain what it recognizes your voice means. Like,
or maybe like she could like tell it to do something even if she's not holding it.
Oh, hold on. I have the option. Oh, okay. I think this is it. And I think this will matter potentially. I have the option. So she goes through the different arrows, the types of arrows. And then she says, I have the option of voice override at any time, but have no idea why I would use it to deactivate the bow's special properties. But to me, that's the arrow. The arrows are so it's because again, this just feels like poor writing to me, honestly. The variety of arrows, razor sharp, incendiary, explosive, turn the bow into a multi-purpose weapon. Each one is recognizable by a distinctive color shaft. I have the option of voice override at any time, but have no idea why I would use it. To deactivate the bow's special properties, I need only tell it good night. Then it goes to sleep until the sound of my voice wakes it again. But it doesn't say what the special properties are.
Maybe she can tell it not to like fire an arrow but not have it explode.
That's what I was thinking, but again, that's less the bow, more the arrow.
Well, right, but maybe like if she was out of normal arrows, then she could use a special arrow, but just be like, I don't want this to be a splody arrow.
I agree. I think it's weird that you would say that to the bow and not just have
not
like
the arrow.
Not the arrow, or have a. Because what does the bow do to the arrow that turns off the explodey? It's all the. We'll get. I have a general an odds and end note about the technology in this book series, but there's no other explanation of what the other special properties are. Like what else the bow does that her voice makes it do. And like you said, the only thing that makes any sense is that you can't fire it.
Right.
So it somehow would have to like lock the string to make it unable to be drawn unless she activates it. And maybe that's possible. But I think you're right that most likely it's that she can take an explodey arrow and make it just a normal arrow, make it not explode by telling the bow not to. And maybe that'll be relevant later. But it's not relevant at any point in the book so far. And so we'll see if it is, and maybe that's why the movie cut it, because maybe it's not relevant.
We shall see.
Maybe this is one of those like writing cool ideas and then forgetting about it, and it's like, she's got a bow, she just shoots her bow. I'm sure people who have read the book and remember things are like, no, you idiots! At the end, she does this. But most importantly, the thing about the bow that the movie doesn't get is the fact that it looks like wings. Like the parts of the bow that come out look like wings, which I thought would look really cool, because I've seen bows designs that look like that, and I don't know why they wouldn't do that unless they were saving it for part 2.
Yeah,
like maybe she's gonna get like an upgraded bow. I'm not actually that might
even better bow.
That actually might honestly happen. Like she might get like an even cooler bow for the big final movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, they might have waited on that. I don't know. She needed to have the cool arrows, but maybe this fancier bow comes next movie. There's a little scene where Haymitch and Katniss, so they have not been talking. Katniss like clawed the shit out of Haymitch's face at one point, which never happens in the movie. But they haven't been talking. They've had lots of issues, but they have a moment in the book right after, right before she's getting ready to go out in the field, I believe it is, that they kind of like squash their beef, and the movie kind of gives them a little scene at the end. But I liked them having this scene earlier, and I don't remember what they're talking about, but they just kind of like come to an agreement and kind of settle things and are fine for the rest of the book, or at least for the rest of the first half of the book. Anyways, I would have liked that scene. There's not a lot of Haymitch in this movie. Not a lot of Haymitch in the book, to be fair, but still. So as they're getting ready to leave to go to District 8 to film their first propaganda video, because, again, Katniss sucks in the studio and they need to get her out in the field, as they're leaving, Finnick wants to come along, but he can't because he's not, he's still sort of...
Yeah, he has not been well.
No, he's not been well. He's dealing with the fallout from Annie being captured by the Capitol. Another character that the movies do a poor job of setting up or explaining, in my opinion. But the books don't do a lot more with that, to be fair. But as he's in his like hospital robe as they're getting ready to leave, and he comes out and he... He has this slide where he doesn't have pants on or whatever. He's just in like a robe, and he's like, "Do you find this distracting?" And I wanted that scene in the movie because I thought it would be fun.
And then coming off of that, the other thing I really wanted, immediately after that happens, they get to the hovercraft, and I think like Fulvia says something about how like cute Gale looks, or something like that, and Boggs, who's played by Mahershala Ali, in the book, says, "Well, we just saw Finnick Odair in his underwear, so I doubt anything could measure up," or something like that. Yeah. And they cut this out of the movie, and please, movie, I would have died to hear Mahershala Ali say that with his utter deadpan seriousness. Yeah. I wanted it.
Yeah, it would have been really good. I thought I had it in the book nailed it, or the movie nailed it, because Mahershala Ali casting as Boggs.
Oh, it was perfect.
Perfect. He's such a good casting. Another thing the movie drops, really disappointing, and maybe we'll get this in part 2. Maybe they're saving some of these things.
Yeah, maybe they're saving some for cool stuff.
For cool reveals in part 2, is that she gets a helmet in the book before she goes to 8, and the helmet is, and I understand not wanting your main character wearing a helmet all the time, but her helmet isn't really a helmet in the book. It's a hood, essentially, but like an armored hood. And so she gets to look like freaking Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Like
she looks like goth Robin Hood.
Yeah. It's like she's got this badass like archery hood and in all black armor. And I was like, why would you not give her that? That's such a and I'm wondering again if maybe part 2 will have some of that. Because it sounded super cool, and I was like, why? No, come on. We also do find out, this is a little detail, that one of the reasons that District 2 is... So everybody is in rebellion against the Capitol except for District 2. And we find out that District 2 isn't in rebellion mainly because they're like favored by the Capitol. And one of the main reasons for that is also where the Peacekeepers come from, primarily, is from District 2. And it's a little detail that I thought was interesting. And I don't even know if we know that District 2 isn't rebelling in the movie
I feel like none of this was explained in the movie.
Yeah.
Which, and like, it's kind of hilarious because, like, in this world, every district has its own, like export
Right.
that it specializes in. And I kind of love that District 2's export is literally cops.
It's cops, yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And they're, yeah. And yeah, I feel like, because one of the things the movie does really well, we'll talk about it, is giving us a wider view of some of the rebellion going on, because in the book, we're just kind of in Katniss's perspective, so we don't get to see what else is going on.
Yeah, and nobody tells her anything. So
nobody tells her
we don't
anything.
really know what's going on.
But she is at least privy to enough information to know, like, okay, every district is rebelling except for District 2. And in the movie, I don't know if you would know that. We see several little vignettes of acts of rebellion in certain specific districts, but I don't know if they ever, they probably do. Again, there's so many, we've watched this movie once, there's a lot of lines, and we're writing notes through a lot of them, so it's hard. Maybe at some point somebody said, every district's in open rebellion except for 2, and I just missed that. But it felt like we needed that context to know, like, okay, it's fully everywhere.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, and it's also important to know that District 2 isn't for the events going into part 2 of this book, or part 2 of the movie, because that's where Katniss is going at the end of this book, or at the end of the first half of the book. She wants to go to District 2 because they have to take District 2, and then they can go take the capital. And maybe they'll set that up. Probably first thing in the next movie, they'll be like, all right, the rebels are doing well in every district except 2, and she's like, send me to 2. It's like, all right, fine. And that solves my problem. I just felt like they could have set that up a little more in this one.
No, I agree.
I love this scene in the book, and we get a similar scene in the movie-ish. Not even similar. We just get like a little line that's kind of reminiscent of this. But there's a scene in the book where Plutarch is trying to explain what a republic is to Katniss and Haymitch, and they're both very skeptical that this could ever work. I thought that was very funny. It made me laugh a lot. They're both like, I don't know about that. And they also... because Plutarch is like, well, yeah, they used to, this existed back in the day. Plutarch, we're going to form a republic where the people of each district in the capital can elect their own representatives to be their voice in a centralized government. Don't look so suspicious. It's worked before. In books, Haymitch mutters. In history books, says Plutarch. And if our ancestors could do it, then we can too. And then this is the other line that I really liked, is Katniss thinking to herself after Plutarch says that, frankly, our ancestors don't seem much to brag about. I mean, look at the state they left us in with the wars and the broken planet. Clearly, they didn't care about what would happen to the people who came after them, but this republic idea sounds like an improvement over our current government. I like that. I like that little couple paragraphs there.
Yeah.
And we don't really get any of that in the movie. So one of the other really, and again, this will probably show up in part 2.
Probably.
Would be my guess. But one of the things they explain as she's getting ready to go to District 8, he's kind of, after BT talks through all of her armor and stuff, the last little note, and I think it's Boggs that explains this, is that she has this little pocket on her armor on her shoulder that holds they call it a nightlock capsule, because
they said they named it for her.
They named it for her because the nightlock berries from the first Hunger Games she was in. But it's basically just a cyanide tablet or whatever. It's a suicide pill. I thought that was a nice, dark, little realistic touch.
Oh yeah.
And I was really surprised that the movie left that out. And I was wondering if maybe it has something to do with ratings, or if they're just saving that for part 2 to up the stakes even more.
I wouldn't be terribly surprised if it had something to do with ratings.
Yeah,
maybe
I don't know.
But at the same time, I feel like they could do it without explicitly calling. Like they don't have to call it a suicide.
And they don't
pill.
in the book. They don't.
No, I don't think they do either.
They just say if you can't. They basically just kind of bounce around or dance around it in the book. They're just like, if you get captured, you can't be taken alive.
We can't afford to have anybody captured.
Yeah, and they're like, we named it a nightlock pill after you, or nightlock after you, and it's very clear, obviously, then what it is.
Right.
And you don't really need to go into detail, but yeah, I was surprised. Again, I'm thinking maybe
that'll be a movie too.
That's adds some stakes when she's going to District 2 for her mission. Maybe then they'll kind of introduce that. There's a little note when they get to District 8. They have the camera crew there. There's 2 camera guys, Pollux and Castor. And there's a little note that Katniss notes how much the camera guys are sweating. And I was really appreciated Suzanne Collins putting that detail in, because as a person who's been a camera guy for a lot of things, a lot of times in my life, boy, you sweat so freaking much. Even if you're not wearing a ton of, like, they're wearing like giant like suits, like camera suits.
They have
basically.
like a whole camera apparatus.
Yeah.
They're not just like holding a camera.
Right, but regardless, anytime I film something, shorts and a t-shirt, I'm drenched in sweat. It could be 50 degrees outside in shorts and a t-shirt, and I'll sweating my butt off if I'm running a camera. And it's mentioned twice how sweaty the camera people are, and I was like, okay, somebody's been around. Somebody asked about. She knows something about camera people. After they get to District 8, they go into this hospital, and she kind of meets with all the survivors of this bombing that happened in District 8. And they all come up and they're like, oh, Katniss, and they all want to see her and talk to her, and they all want to touch her and stuff because she's the symbol of the rebellion and all that sort of thing. And after they leave the hospital, Gale mentions to her how surprised he is that she let all those people touch her and didn't like have a panic attack and run out of the hospital. And again, I thought that was another, going back to something we mentioned in like the first episode, of the coding of and the reading of Katniss as autistic. And it seems clear to me here that is obviously not, people with autism aren't the only people that don't like lots of people touching them sometimes. Yeah. But that is a characteristic often of people on the spectrum. And so I thought, of not liking being touched and that sort of thing. And so I thought that was maybe another little kind of nod to that aspect of Katniss's character.
And something that Gil would know about her.
Yeah.
Having been close to her for so long.
Yeah. So initially I had this in better in the movie, and then it ended and I was like, oh, that's it? And so I moved it to better in the book, and that's the fight in District 8. Yeah. Is really short and kind of underwhelming compared to what happens in the book.
Well, I kind of felt like they subbed a lot of the action for just having like towers fall. Yeah. Well,
I don't know. It's not essentially the same thing happens, but the Capitol shows up and they're bombing the hospital and stuff, and Katniss and Gale go to try to intervene. And they get up on the roofs and they shoot down a couple bombers. And essentially that is what happens. But in the book, they shoot down like a dozen of them or something like that. And I was expecting this like slightly more drawn out, dramatic, like sort of them running around, hiding, shooting at bombers. You know what I mean? Like I was expecting more from that scene of like a more tense action beat. And it's just they get up on the roof and the bombers shoot at them once. They hide. Then they pop out and shoot the bombers. And there's only two of them, and they crash, and that's the end of that scene. Yeah. And that is what happens in the book. It's just there's more going on, and it seems more chaotic. And I just was wondering if maybe there was like a budget issue and not wanting to like.
Yeah, maybe they didn't want to blow their budget on one scene.
Yeah, and it's not that important. You get the important part of this scene with them shooting two of them down. Like it's fine. It works as is. I just thought it was a little. I don't know. I was like, okay.
One random detail from the book in that scene that I kind of missed was the explicit reference that they were using the same technique to shoot down the planes that they used to hunt geese back at home.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't make sense in the book. It wouldn't make sense in the movie because there's only two bombers in the movie, whereas in the book there's like a dozen v of them or whatever, and they're flying in a V. And so, shooting them like they shoot at geese because she says like geese, and then they split the line of bombers between themselves. How they hunt geese. Yeah, it's a nice little detail, and but there's only two bombers.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense.
She would just say, I'll take the one on the right. Like, like it doesn't really, there's also, so at the end of this, at one point in the book, she gets hit, a bomb goes off, and she gets like blown across into a building, and like she gets like, she feels this pain in her knee, and she's clearly like really injured. And I like this moment in the book that once they shoot down the bombers and they realize the hospital's destroyed. And once her adrenaline wears off from all this, she just throws up and realizes she like can't stand and like falls over and is very severely injured. And Boggs has to pick her up and run her back.
I think she throws up on Boggs too, which could have been another kind
Yes.
of like fun character moment for him.
Yeah.
Like reacting to that.
Yeah. I also just like that sort of vulnerability for her, like in that moment of just, it's just making her feel less like a superhero and more like a real person who like she got hurt, and just the like coming off the adrenaline, she's just and everything that just happened and how horrifying it all is, she just throws up, and it just felt like that makes sense. And then I felt
and
like,
especially because like she's not a soldier, like she doesn't have any military training or anything. She's just a person who's really good at bow and arrow.
So when they get back to District 13 after the debacle in District 8, there's this moment, and so we didn't get into this, and actually I guess this could be a better in the book too, because I kind of like this, is that her and Gale actually like fight away from their team, like the rest of the camera crew and Boggs, and Haymitch is on her intercom with Katniss, and she like pulls her intercom out and to ignore Haymitch, and her and Gale kicks Boggs in the face and breaks his nose, and they run off to go help out and fight. And I like that when they get back, Boggs and Haymitch and everybody all pretend that this was all planned and not her like going rogue. And I really liked that dynamic within the rebellion of like Plutarch and Haymitch, not because they know Coin already doesn't like Katniss and thinks she's too much of a wild card and too much of a a liability, and so they're all like, oh yeah, no, that was all according to plan, that was what we wanted, that was great, she did great, good job. But they're all furious with her.
Look at this great footage we got.
But in actuality, they're both furious with her, and like Haymitch has this thing where he comes and he's like, you're gonna wear your earpiece and you're not taking it out, or I'm gonna put he has like a helmet thing that he's gonna strap to her head that she can't take off, that so he can talk in her ear, and then if she gets out of that, he was gonna have them implant a communication chip in her brain or something like that. And I liked that inner sort of the inner politics of the rebellion, and sort of the navigating the different people within it. I thought it was cool in the book, and I was wishing there had been a little more of that in the movie. When we finally see the propo that they put together from this footage they shot in 8, in the book it opens up with Claudius Templesmith, who's the announcer for the Hunger Games.
Yes.
His voice. And I wrote in my notes, oh, Claudius is working for the rebellion.
I had the same thought when I read that.
And then we go like 2 lines further, and then they explain that no, actually they're just stole clips of his voice and used it in the
steal that sound bite.
Yeah, they just stole it. Was like him introducing Katniss in like the last Hunger Games or whatever.
Yeah,
they just used that sound bite in the propo, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I get not used. I mean, it might even have been his voice in the movie, and I just didn't realize it, to be fair.
I don't remember.
Yeah, but anyways, I like that detail in the book.
It is interesting to me that in District 13 they still get all of the like broadcasts and everything from the Capitol.
Yeah, it's weird because they do watch it all the time. Like she watches it and they just let it play. It seems weird that they would let.
I guess I don't really know how that works. Maybe the Capitol can't control that it goes there and they just pick it up, or
no. I guess I meant that I wouldn't think that 13 would like play it on all their TVs and stuff.
Yeah.
Like the Capitol's propaganda. Like obviously they would want to watch it. Like the people in intelligence and stuff would want to watch it. But you wouldn't think
it just like plays in the cafeteria.
Like watch it, like can just see it on the cafeteria. And I was like, why would they be playing the propaganda from the Capitol in the or maybe it is because I was like, I guess you could if you curated it. Like if the leadership was like curating the right propaganda to kind of like, because obviously they know most of the people in 13 are like on their, they don't have to worry about like it causing dissension, but it could with some people. I don't know. I just thought it was. So right after the success of the first propo that they shoot with Katniss, they decide they gotta churn out a half dozen other ones immediately because it's all going so well. And they come up with an idea for a series that is like the We Remember propos that are about like all of the contestants who died in the Hunger Games and stuff, and they're going to have a story about Rue and all that sort of thing, and they kind of cut all of that from the movie.
All that gets cut from the movie, and I get why they cut that. I was hoping that we would see it in the background, like see them like working on it or something as like an Easter egg, but I didn't catch that if it was.
Yeah. Another thing that I don't know if I think it comes across in the movie, but not as explicitly as it does in the book, which is the sort of cynicism and the similarity in how the people putting together the propaganda view it in both the Capitol and District 13.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, and I don't remember who says this, but somebody says, "It's painful to watch. That's what makes it so effective." And it's just that inherent like grossness to propagandizing suffering.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to. It's a complicated topic that I think is not as maybe sort of surface level as it seems. Just in general, the idea of like broadcasting. So like the greater discussion being like, you know, the idea it's painful to watch. That's what makes it so effective. That's inherently initially sort of off-putting and gross feeling to hear somebody just sort of bluntly state that about, you know, these propaganda pieces that they're producing about like Rue or whatever. That being said, I think there's a fine line that you have to find between like exploiting suffering and showing suffering for a good reason.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
obviously that line feels cynical and gross on first blush. Like it's painful to watch. That's what makes it so effective. But that's also just like true and can be good. Like you don't necessarily just not want, like you have to show people the real horribleness, the brutal, awful reality of what the Capitol does and is, if you want to spur people to take action. And obviously, bluntly saying, yeah, it's horrible, and that's good because it'll make, you know, it'll really whip people up. Sounds gross, but that's also just like true, and you want it to be the case. Like you want to show, like in this instance where like take for example, like showing the atrocities of the Holocaust after, like documenting it and broadcasting the atrocities of what happened in during the Holocaust in Germany and across Europe is super important. And like a very important thing to document and make sure people see and know about and remember. And so it's, I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying? Like,
No, I get what you're saying. I think I'm gonna use a less intense example.
Yeah.
So the difference to me is like the difference between, you know, those commercials for Dawn where they show like ducklings covered in oil.
Yeah.
And that is to sell Dawn.
Right.
Contrast that with something like an ASPCA commercial where they show a sad dog, and that is to get people to support a good cause.
True.
And adopt dogs.
Very true. The purpose of it is very different and matters. Yeah. If it's to sell product, then yes, it's there's
right. Going back to what you said about like exploitation of suffering versus like showing suffering in order to accomplish something that is ultimately good.
Yeah. But it's funny because propaganda and that's what I think this book does a good job of highlighting, is that propaganda rides that line, like this political propaganda rides that line.
Yeah, it does.
And very easily. And the thing that I think is really interesting is that the book kind of goes to great lengths to showcase that the people best at producing the political propaganda are also the people who are really good at selling you product A. Like it's the same system, it's the same machine that makes you know, your pro-liberation propaganda video that also makes your Buy Dawn soap propaganda video.
Also, I know that the ducklings in those commercials generally aren't actually covered
No.
in oil. Don't come for me.
No, they're not.
I'm aware of that, but it's the same
Idea.
It's the same idea.
Yeah. So the scene where they're out shooting some propos and they're all sitting by a lake, and it's the same thing. They're sitting by Katniss's lake.
Yeah.
In the book and in the movie, I guess. Because we've never actually seen the lake in the. Oh, we did in the.
We see it
the
briefly
very beginning of the first second
in the very
movie.
yeah.
But they're sitting there, and a Mockingjays show up, and she's sitting next to Pollux, who we find out is an Avox.
Mm-hmm.
And this scene is in the movie, and it's very, very similar. I just thought the book's version was slightly better, specifically because he sees the Mockingjay, and he kind of points to like her pin, and she goes, "Yeah, it's a Mockingjay." And I don't remember if she tells him to whistle or if he just starts doing it.
I think he just starts doing it.
Yeah, but he starts whistling, and she's watching him, and he starts whistling, and then the Mockingjay starts whistling back at him, and she says that he just lights up, and it's the first conversation he's had in years.
Mm-hmm.
And the scene in the movie, it's all of that. It just doesn't quite have the same heart that I was like. You know what I mean?
It doesn't have the same impact.
Yeah. That line about it's the first conversation he's had in years, I didn't feel that was the case in the movie scene. Like it didn't hit, like his reaction didn't feel like somebody like feeling free, or you know what I mean? Like having this sort of like once in a lifetime moment for somebody who, you know, I don't know. It just felt very, I don't know. It felt like a little weaker compared to what we get in the movie or what we get in the book. But then he does ask Katniss to sing. And again, overall, it's pretty good in the movie. It's basically identical. It's just something about it just doesn't quite capture what I imagined in the book and how powerful the scene in my head was in the book. But going off of that, he asked her to sing, and she sings the Hanging Tree song, which she also does in the movie. But we get more backstory in the book, which I thought was interesting, where she goes through and explains about how her and Prim like made rope necklaces when they were kids, and then her mom found it and got mad and told her that she can't sing it anymore, and it was a song her and her dad sung.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. And the thing that most cracked me up, and the reason I wanted to talk about it, is that so she sings the whole song. We get all the lyrics in the book. And then Katniss goes on to like do like media analysis for us. It's super funny where she goes, being older, I began to understand the lyrics. At the beginning, it sounds like a guy is trying to get his girlfriend to secretly meet up with him at midnight, but it's an odd place for a tryst. A hanging tree where a man was hung for murder? The murderer's lover must have had something to do with the killing, or maybe they were just going to punish her anyways because his corpse called out for her to flee. That's weird, obviously, the talking corpse bit, but it's not until the third verse that the hanging tree begins to get unnerving. It's like I felt like I'm reading like a book report. Like I'm like reading Katniss's book report, or you know, like her 11th grade lit paper about like the hanging tree, and it's just I don't know, it cracked me up. She goes for like 2 pages. She goes on
it's
and
a
breaks
very
down
long analysis of every
all
verse
of those like symbolism and what is
song.
going on in the song, and it just made me laugh because I was like, all right. I guess
But
maybe
it's not a terrible breakdown of like how to do that process.
No, and no, it really isn't. And I think it's actually, again, for the target audience age, I think it's actually fine. I think it just was a little funny to me. It's like, all right, it's pulling out her pulled out her syllabus and is going through. Yeah. And yeah, no, it is. She does a good job kind of going through, and I think it's a good way of showing kids how to think through, like younger audiences, how to kind of think through analyzing media like that. It's just made me laugh. And then after she sings the song in the book, and we don't get this moment in the movie at all, Plutarch comes up to her and says, "Where do you come up with this stuff? Lucky the cameras were rolling." And then he kisses her on the head. And I wish we had gotten more of that weird Plutarch, that like kind of gross producer Plutarch that we get in the, he's just kind of, we get that a little bit. We get it in one scene in the movie when she's filming the studio stuff. And he's like yelling at her from the behind the glass or whatever, was like the most we get of that side of Plutarch. Because in general, we just kind of get the more congenial, like well-meaning, like I don't know, affable Plutarch in the movie. But I thought that scene belies some of Plutarch's like weirder.
Marketing Plutarch.
Yeah, not a fan of it, but I wish it had been in the movie. And then there's a fun little scene while they're hanging out, where Gale and Katniss have had some tension over a handful of things at this point. Primarily, I think at this point is stuff with PETA, but then also the disagreeing about like the prep team and other stuff like that. So they've just kind of been frosty for a while, and they have this little, now that they're out in the wild together, they're kind of dissolve the tension among themselves, and she like throws a blackberry in the air, and she's not sure if he's going to catch it or not, and at the last minute he catches it in his mouth, and then she knows like they're going to be okay or whatever. It's a nice little scene.
Yeah,
and they bring back the line.
Yeah, and it's a nice callback to the first book as well.
Yeah, because she tosses it and says, "Met the odds," and then he catches it and says, "Be ever in your favor," or something like that. So I have Shelby messaged and said she really likes this scene. I liked it overall. I liked it more after I'll just get into it. The scene where after the hanging tree song, we get sort of a chorus of the hanging tree being sung by lots of people. And then we cut to these people marching down to a dam. And then ultimately we find out it's the rebels taking a bunch of bombs down into the dam to blow up the dam, which we hear about in the book, but we don't ever see happen.
Yeah.
We know the rebels blow up a dam at some point. And I like the scene a lot. In particular, once they get down to the bridge and are like trying to storm across it, and they're like getting mowed down, and then like they get the bomb. It reminded me of a lot of the scene from the Two Towers, where they're like dragging the bombs under the bridge or under the wall, and then they got to run in there and blow it up. But the first part where they're all marching and singing the hanging tree song, I get it. And I didn't dislike it, but it felt like I had just been teleported into Les Mis. And I was like, this feels weird. Like, you know what I mean?
I liked it. I didn't have a problem with it.
To me, it just felt, again, I'm like I'm watching Les Mis now. Like, it's like they're
it's
like
a little too scripted.
And a little too
clean.
like we're all marching together, like singing this song like of rebellion. It just, again, something about it felt, and again, I think even because of specifically the way it's sung, and because they're all like marching kind of in time, but not really together, something about it just felt out of place to me. That first bit of it, I liked when the song kept going, and then like they're not like marching anymore, because then I didn't feel like I was watching a musical all of a sudden. Like just there's like 20 seconds of it where I'm like, why is this a musical all of a sudden? Like, what is going on? And I get what they're going for, and I don't think it didn't work. It just took me a little bit out of it, because I wasn't expecting Les Mis.
I wonder if there was ever any discussion of a musical version of this.
Probably not. I mean, maybe.
So?
Actually,
maybe.
probably yes. There's probably
was.
a discussion of a musical version of everything.
I think there probably was.
Yeah.
So following that, we see PETA on
Somebody
the Capitol.
could just do Les Mis. But in
the Hunger Games?
I mean,
yeah, you could.
Could probably figure out a way to do it. I don't know enough about the story of Les Mis to know if it tracks well, but
I mean, I don't know that you could like pick up the exact same plot.
No, but you could probably use a lot of the songs.
But I think you could probably repurpose some of the music.
A lot of the music.
So we get more PETA propaganda from the Capitol following this. And this is where he ends up giving them a warning that the Capitol is going to attack District 13, which was much more explicit in the movie, which I didn't really care for.
No, I agree with that. I had this in the movie Nailed It because it's pretty similar, but you're right.
It's fairly similar.
We both said this watching the movie. Like, it's
that was much more explicit.
It's particularly funny because in the movie, Haymitch goes, "That's a warning," and we were both like, "Obviously, it wasn't like." And it made me actually wonder if like Haymitch's line was recorded without because obviously they weren't seeing PETA on the giant screen when they were filming that. He said that line in a vacuum. They may have done the PETA part after.
Yeah, maybe.
You know what I mean? Like in a studio later recorded that, and they didn't know what the line was going to be exactly. Because PETA literally is just like, they're coming to kill you all. And it's like,
well, in the book, it's much more like he's kind of rambling and saying like more fragmented
much
things.
More like in code in the book.
And he says like, you'll be dead by morning.
Yeah.
And then Haymitch has to kind of convince them that it's a warning.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make any sense for him to have to tell them that it's a warning in the movie, because it is very clearly a warning.
Yeah. I agree. It's so weird. It's so silly. It made me chuckle a lot. Yeah, in the book he says, Katniss, how do you think this will end? What will be left? No one is safe. Not in the capital, not in the districts, and you, in 13, dead by morning.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I agree. Dumb change, because that version of the book is still clear without being like super obvious.
Yeah. And we don't get any blood splatter in the movie either.
No, they like grab him and like...
Yeah, and she sees like blood splatter on the tiles before the broadcast cuts out.
Yeah, because the camera falls over in the book. She's like, the camera falls and you see blood. And then the movie is just like, they just grab him and the camera cuts off. It's a little more dramatic in the movie, or in the book.
Mm-hmm. So then they all go even deeper down.
Yeah, they have like bunkers. Even
District
deeper bunkers.
13 goes like down to the core of the earth, apparently.
Pretty much.
So they go deeper down because the Capitol's going to attack, and Prim and Gale almost don't make it through the gates in time because Prim went back to get Buttercup the cat, who luckily had come inside on time, I guess.
Apparently, yeah.
And this line is almost in the movie. And we had it in opposite sections.
Yeah.
In the book, she says, I couldn't leave him behind, not again.
Yeah.
And I liked that as like a callback to her having to leave him in District 12.
Yeah.
But you felt differently.
I didn't realize, well, to be fair, I didn't realize that line was in the book. I just forgot. So I had it in better in the movie mainly because I just liked this line. I still think I could make an argument for the change being better than what's in the book. I just thought it wasn't in the book at all. But in the movie, the line is, I can't leave him behind, or I couldn't leave him behind. I couldn't live with myself. And I thought I liked that because it's very clearly, she says it to Katniss, and it's something that very clearly sits in Katniss's head in relation to Peeta.
Yes.
And I think both lines work in that regard.
Yeah, I think they do.
And again, mine was mostly better in the movie because I thought that line just wasn't in the book at all. I forgot about it. So during this whole thing, Plutarch reminds Katniss that she has to put on a good show still and be brave like Peeta. And she's like, just wants to hit him because he's just obnoxious. Again, some of the more like obnoxious side of Plutarch, which I wouldn't have minded seeing in the movie. And then during the bombing goes on for like days in the book, and I think it's only like overnight in the movie, it seems like, but it goes on for several days.
Yeah, they're down there for days.
In the book, and at one point when they finally, the bombing lets up and Katniss makes it into the command center, she goes in and she sees that they've busted out the coffee, which coffee is not allowed in another dumb thing. Coffee's not allowed in District 13 because they have like really puritanical rules about like drugs and stuff. So they don't allow caffeine or anything like that. But they bust it out as an emergency stimulant, to keep them all going because they're up all the time trying to deal with the bombing and that sort of thing. And I thought that was a fun little detail, again, for a dumb thing.
I also liked Katniss because she's like, oh, I've never liked coffee. I think it's really gross.
Yeah.
And then Finnick is like, we have to put cream and sugar in it.
Yeah.
And I liked her in that moment figuring out like, oh, I actually like this.
Yeah.
When it's doctored up with cream and sugar. Because I feel like that to me is a very like late teens, early 20s revelation.
Yeah.
That like, oh, hang on a second.
Wait a second. This is
Wait a
delicious.
minute.
It also makes sense for her too, because she's never had like sugar and cream are probably pretty. Well, she would have had cream because of the goat. They had a goat, which is never in the movies. But sugar, I imagine, is probably a commodity, and it's not something they had readily access.
I'm sure that she wouldn't have had ready access to sugar.
Yeah,
probably not coffee either.
Probably not coffee, but coffee, depending on yeah. So probably not even coffee. But anyways, so they get outside after the bombing. And they want to go film a propo and be like, look, we just got to tell them that you're alive, that we're all survived. Nobody died. District 13's fine. Your bombing didn't work, blah, blah, blah. And they get her up to the surface and she gets into this giant pit. And as they get into this crater, she sees that it's covered in roses, that they dropped white roses, that President Snow dropped white roses after the bombing. And she starts freaking out in the book and in the movie to some extent. I like this whole scene better in the book, in my opinion. But one of the main things is that in the movie, she starts yelling. She starts freaking out because she's like, he's going to kill him. He's going to kill Peeta. He's going to kill Peeta. And she like loses it. And that's literally like the opposite of what causes her to freak out in the book. Is she knows he's not going to kill PETA.
Yeah.
That he's just going to torture him forever.
Yeah.
As long as she's alive and like part of the rebellion. And that's what causes her to freak out. And now I get in the movie, it's easier shorthand.
Right.
That seems easier for her to yell, he's going to kill PETA. But that's the whole point. And the whole point of the revelation with the cat, which they even do in the movie.
Yeah, they do that.
Like the cat chasing the light and that she's the cat and PETA is the light. And you know, and then in that instance, she's Snow. But yeah, she realizes that no, they're just going to torture him and keep him alive forever to torture me. And so I thought that was kind of dumb and annoying that they changed it to he's going to kill PETA, and that being the thing that freaks her out because it's literally the opposite of the point of not what's going to happen. But whatever, it's fine. But on top of that, in the movie, she just sort of like hyperventilates a little bit. In the movie, she like loses it. Like in the book, she like loses it and is like sobbing and inconsolable and just like has a complete breakdown. And it just felt a little, I don't know, underwhelming.
Well, we talked a little bit earlier about moments of vulnerability for her.
Yeah.
And this, I think, was another missed opportunity. I think the movie tried.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hit in the same way that the book does.
Yeah, not in the same way as when you're reading the book. They literally have to like drug. Well, I guess maybe they do in the movie. I'm not sure. They sedate her in the book and like take her back down underneath because she's like just completely lost it. One thing that I thought a little detail about, so they decide they're gonna go save PETA and Annie and some of the other tribute like Joanna and stuff. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is after she knows that that's happening, she runs into Finnick. And Finnick, she tells him that this is happening, and she expects him to be like freaking out like she is about it. And he's like fine with it. He's like seems kind of like okay, and he's like he says to her, and I liked this little conversation they have. He's like, well, by tonight they'll either be dead or with us. One way or the other, it'll be over. Like,
it's a fair point.
You know what I mean? Like he's like, and it's a fair point because it's and same for her. Like either PETA will be dead and you won't have to be suffering with this anymore, or you'll save him. Unfortunately, like a worse thing happens that she wasn't expecting, which is they save him and he's a Manchurian candidate. But yeah. Also, Finnick gives his big speech, and we'll talk more about that in later segments. But one of the things he talks about how is the Capitol basically sex traffics all the old champions, prostitutes them out against their will, and she asks Haymitch if that happened to him.
Yeah.
After she sees Finnick talking about this, I think she asked Haymitch. Pretty sure she asked Haymitch, and that actually didn't happen to him. And he says it's because they killed his entire family and his girlfriend within weeks of him winning the games. Because we found out in the last book how he won the games. He like exploited the Capitol's like the force field system to win the games, and they, in the same way that they hated Katniss for the berries thing, they hated him for that, and so they murdered his entire family and everybody he cared about. So they had no leverage over him because the way they sucker people into the sex trafficking is by like if you don't do what we tell you, we'll just murder like your parents or whatever. Yeah. And so they do it, but he's like they had no one to kill, and they couldn't kill me because they wanted me to be like an example to future champions. And I thought that was a really dark, horrifying little scene for like moment for Haymitch. And I was kind of disappointed we didn't get any of that backstory for him. Cause again, it makes him a more tragic, sad. I don't know. I mean, it makes all the champions more tragic and sad, but that in particular, I thought, ugh. So let's talk about the final big change kind of in the movie.
I mean, it is a pretty big change because this doesn't happen at all in the book.
No. They're going to save PETA, and Finnick is doing it live in the movie. In the book, it's like they recorded these and they're broadcasting them. In the movie, it's all happening live. and Finnick is giving his big speech. And in the movie, they make it just Finnick. In the book, Finnick and Katniss go record some stuff. They edit together a piece, and they're going to broadcast that out. And in this one, Finnick is talking live, and then at some point, though, things start going bad in the raid, and Katniss is like watching this all play out, and she's like, "Put me on the air." She like volunteers to be broadcast to like get President Snow's attention. And I didn't hate that initially, like wanting like give it like her like volunteering to do that in that moment. But then they do this thing where she spends like it feels like 5 minutes going, "President Snow? Are you there? President Snow?"
Felt like for
President Snow, it's Katniss Everdeen, President Snow. And the way she does it feels like when you're on a Zoom call for work and somebody disconnects. There's like the weirdest amount of like, it all felt so casual. The way do you know what I'm talking about in that moment? Like, I felt like her delivery of President Snow, this is Katniss. It felt so wrong for the moment that I was like, what? It felt so silly. So he does eventually come on, and him and her talk. They have a conversation. Yeah. And I liked the idea of that. I thought the whole thing played out. I thought Donald Sutherland, who's usually great, I thought was a little too arch in this scene and like maniacal in a way that Snow usually isn't. Mm-hmm. He's just like, like he's like very like, you know, mustache twirling villain in this moment. That Snow is a much more like cold, reserved kind of villain. I don't know. I didn't really like this.
I didn't really care for it overall. I don't know. To me, it just didn't work.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan. I was not a huge fan. It just...
Well, and it was kind of confusing for me, too, because at this point in the book, we don't know yet that, like, basically they let it happen on purpose.
That the Capitol lets them take PETA.
Yeah.
We don't know that.
We don't know that. So, like, I was watching the movie, like, I don't understand because it just works. Like, they get them out.
Yeah, because at one point there's a beat where, like, what happens? Somebody says something and it becomes clear that, like, because he says, like, "Oh, your friends are in the building right now trying to come rescue young PETA," or whatever. Yeah. And they're like, "It's a trap." And she's like, "It's a trap. Get him out of there." And it's like, we're both like,
but we know that it works.
Yeah. But to be fair, if you had read the book and not stopped halfway, you would also know that it was
on purpose.
It was on purpose. So we're in a very distinct situation where this doesn't work for us.
Yeah, it really didn't work for me. Yeah. I was so confused. I was like, why are they doing this? Yeah. And it's so like it is like weirdly acted.
I thought it was all just not acted great. Like that whole scene, like in general, her and Snow, I thought both were just not. They're both very good throughout all of these movies, and I thought this scene just didn't feel right. Like it felt like an afterthought, like maybe like a shot it in reshoots or something with like I don't know, something about the whole thing.
Maybe they did it more like accurate to the book, and some executive was like, I don't understand.
No, we need
a
confrontation between Snow and Katniss.
We need something more explicit than
Yeah, I don't know. I was not a fan. I didn't hate it. I liked getting them in front of each other and talking to each other. I just don't think it played out very well. I don't think it came together in the way that if you told me they were going to have like Katniss and Snow are going to have a like during the raid she's going to like talk to them over the I would be like, "Oh, okay, that could be interesting." But then if you show me this, I'd be like, "No, okay. I guess that's what we got." Like
maybe they both disagreed with the change.
Yeah,
maybe. Phoning it in.
Yeah, it's just, I couldn't get over how much Snow didn't feel like Snow from the rest of the movie. He's just like smiling and like, again, just mustache twirling villain, which is like not.
Yeah, it's a far less subtle portrayal of that character.
Snow he whispers everything and he leans in and he whispers in your ear that he's going to murder your whole family. He doesn't go, I know what you're up to. Ah, ha, 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 ha. You thought you could. You thought you were smarter than us. Like, it's, I don't know. Not a big fan. Anyways. All right. That was what we had for better in the book. Let's go ahead and talk about what we thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
Finnick has a line at the very beginning of the movie, like right before the opening title card, where he says, they're talking about like PETA and Annie and them, and he's like, I wish they were all dead and we were too. And I thought that, I don't think that line's in the book.
I don't think it is, but it really captures Finnick in this book.
Yeah, Finnick in this book, and I think it's a good moment to sort of, it's a good, and leading right into the title card, I think it sets up the dire circumstances of this movie and sort of the just how horrible it is for everybody right now. There's a great shot when they get to 12. So eventually when we jump forward and she's going to visit 12 for the first time after the bombing, and they get there and the hovercraft, we see them flying in, and we don't see like much establishing shots of 12. They're flying over woods, and then we cut to her getting out of the hovercraft, and the hovercraft is behind her taking up the entire shot. And so we see her walk out and her reaction to what she's seeing, but we don't see what she's seeing. And we don't know at this point what.
Yeah.
This is the only good thing they did with the District 12 reveal, because, again, we talked about earlier about how it should have been the opening shot. But this moment is really cool. We see we see her reaction, but the hovercraft's taking up everything. She gets off, and the hovercraft flies away, and as it flies up, it reveals the destruction behind her, and it's a super striking reveal. It's a great moment, and I was like, okay, little bit of redemption for how I wish you would have started the movie. This moment works really well. Like, that was really cool. I was like, ooh, that's using film to your advantage there. We also get like a speech by Snow, kind of reestablishing him, and we, like, as he's giving this big speech, we see him execute, or not him, but peacekeepers are like executing rebels
orders.
in all the different districts. And just seeing that again, I thought it's a good stakes setter for the film, and it just immediately dials everything up to 11. And I like that moment.
There was a little moment during that scene that I really liked too, where he when Snow starts talking about how anyone associated with the Mockingjay symbol has committed treason, and we see his granddaughter slowly start to undo her Katniss side braid. Yeah,
which we established in the last movie, which was a movie edition. His granddaughter is a complete movie edition.
Yes. And there was something else that we liked in that movie too, was his granddaughter being like a Katniss fan. Yeah, and we mentioned that, that she talks about how all the girls are doing their hair like Katniss and whatnot at her school. And that was a nice little moment. And then, like, almost immediately following that, we see Prim in District 13, and she has her hair in the signature side braid, which I also loved. Yep. Another movie edition that I liked, we see Katniss, we know she's having nightmares, and we see her in District 13 having a nightmare, and something that the movie added was her dreaming that PETA was there with her. Yeah. To help her through that, and then he's not there. Yeah. I also had that note. I thought that was a really nice moment. It helps remind us as movie goers who haven't seen Hunger Games since 2 years, whenever the last one came out, reminding us of their relationship, actually showing them together, and that specifically that aspect of their relationship of him helping her through her night terrors and that sort of thing. An Effie line that I loved, especially since we lost some of the like talk of trying to rebuild a republic. Yeah. And Effie has this line, everything old can be made new again, like democracy. Like democracy. Yeah, and her delivery of it is fantastic. like democracy. Let's talk about the scene where they try to shoot her on a soundstage. So good. It was fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it's straight. It could have been the movie nailed it, but they just elevated it just slightly.
It's so fantastic. My favorite part of it, apart from the performance, is great. You know, Jennifer Lawrence doing this like stilted, horrible thing, and then I loved, which is not in the book, Plutarch on the other side of the glass, like yelling at her, like trying to get the performance out of her. But she's standing on the soundstage, and they have a future blue screen behind her. It's this like weird like grid system that has these little blue lights, but very clearly hearkening and calling back to the blue screen used in film production in modern day. And they have the giant fans on her blowing her hair and stuff. That whole scene.
I loved the little moment when they say something about like the background, and she like looks behind her, like
what?
Like what?
Yeah.
When she gets to the hospital in District 8, I loved the addition of everyone in the hospital doing the 3-finger District 12 salute for her.
Yeah. Also, going back to that scene, I just realized that scene where she's doing that, there was a blue screen behind her when she was filming, like when Jennifer Lawrence was filming that scene. I'm pretty sure, because I'd have to go watch it again, but I'm pretty sure that giant like fake blue screen set is a digital set. So in fact, it's very meta. She is in fact standing, and her turning around and looking at the blue wall behind her. She was actually, she didn't even have to act in that moment. It looped around back on itself in a way that is wild. Yeah. I did like this little moment when they, in the book, the bombers show up in District 8 and start bombing things and blow up the hospital.
Yeah.
But in the movie, and because we're in Katniss's perspective in the book, we don't know what led to that or anything.
Right. There's no indication that they like knew she was there or anything like that.
In the movie, we see they have surveillance footage and they see her in District 8, and then they send the bombers, and Snow has this little spiel about, he's like, bomb that, kill everyone in the hospital or whatever, and his generals or whatever kind of like look at him, and he says, everyone inside that hospital has committed treason. Show them what it costs to be friends with Katniss Everdeen. And I like that moment for Snow, again, because he does it, it's very like just cold and dark and not like
I thought District 13 having its own cheer was interesting.
Yeah,
It sounded like a football cheer.
I kind of hated it because it sounded like a Marine. It sounded like they're going hooah, like the Marine
it
thing.
did. But I guess that makes sense because they're like a military district.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I think that's what they're going for. I didn't mind it. Yeah, it was whatever. I was indifferent to it, I guess.
And then we get...
This is the best scene in my favorite scene in the movie. This is the best scene
in the whole movie.
I got chills watching this scene.
Lumberjacks murdering peacekeepers.
This shit totally... Because this is not in the book at all. Again, because we only stay in her perspective, in Katniss's perspective. This scene... Because you don't know where it's going. Again, as a book reader, no idea what's going to happen here. I mean, you assume that something...
right?
All these lumberjacks are walking through the woods, and it's District 7, right?
It's just because it's Joanna Mason's district.
It's the lumberjack
the lumber district.
Yeah,
the main export is lumberjacks.
Yeah, it's like the Pacific Northwest or whatever. And they they're all walking through the trees, and the peacekeepers behind them walking them out to their to go cut down trees or whatever. And one of them does the the Mockingjay whistle, and they all just start running, and a bunch of them are getting mowed down, and it's super like, what is their plan here or whatever. And they all start climbing the trees, and you're like, what the fuck is happening? And it's wild and it looks cool because they're doing that. I don't know if you've ever seen like the lumberjack.
Yeah, the lumberjack climb. Yeah, I don't know what it's called.
Because I used to, when I was a kid, every now and then on ESPN they'd play like the lumberjack games or whatever, where they like chop down trees and use chainsaws and stuff as fast as possible. And one of them is climbing a tree like that, where they use like a rope or a chain, and they have like spikes on their boots, and they climb a 100-foot tree in like 10 seconds or whatever. And they all start climbing these trees, and they get up in the trees, and all the peacekeepers are on the ground.
Yeah, and it's like misty, it's foggy, so they
foggy.
Can't see them when they get high enough.
And the trees are really tall, because again, I think it's supposed to be like the Pacific Northwest or
all
like redwoods
all these lumberjacks vanish up into the trees.
Vanish up into the trees, and then you just hear from the distance, if we burn, you burn with us. And then this dude hits a fucking button and the whole forest fucking explodes and just blows up all of these peacekeepers. I was so unprepared for that scene, and I literally I was like, holy shit, that was awesome. That was so cool and so unexpected. And like, it like literally like took my breath away because I was just not prepared for it. And it was such a cool, like, action set piece, like, but also like terrible and horrifying, but like, and then, yeah, everything about that scene is just a master. I loved it. It was so cool. I love it. Best scene in the movie.
So Katniss and Gale go hunting in District 13, which they do in the book. And this is mentioned in the book. They mention that like the animals aren't even afraid of them. But I liked this scene in the movie where she aims her bow at this like massive stag or like a moose or something. It's huge. And then it just like looks at her and she can't bring herself to shoot it. And I think Gale says it almost seems unfair. They're not even afraid of us. Yeah. And I liked that little scene. Yeah.
It's funny because I was sitting on that and I was trying to figure out thematically what that scene was supposed to like who's the deer and who are the, you know what I mean? And I didn't track in onto anything in my head immediately, at least, in terms of like, because that felt like a very poignant, like, we're making a point about somebody being the deer here and other people being the hunter, but nothing really meshed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I thought about, I didn't think about it too long to like try to put it together, but I thought about it for a minute or two as we were, and I was like, what is...
I don't know that it necessarily meshes with like the players and what's going on in the main storyline, but I think it could kind of potentially mesh with what you were saying earlier about Suzanne Collins and this potential like message of like return to a simpler time kind of a thing. When nature was natural.
Yeah, I guess it could be, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. It is it's an interesting little scene, and I did like it a lot. Because I thought it raised interesting, like it was a nice little like slow scene that kind of made you think and go, okay, all right. And I mean but at the same time I was like, but what are we saying with this scene? And I wasn't sure what we were saying with the scene. Was my only like it's not even negative because I'm sure it is. I just probably didn't put it together while we were watching the movie because I was immediately moving on to the next thing. But I did like that scene. I liked in the movie that they just changed. So in the book, PETA's second propo that he does for the Capitol that we see is he's urging them all to no, what is he?
It's the second one.
This is specifically the one where he's addressing Katniss, where he's like, Katniss, what are you? I know you don't want any of this. I know you weren't. You didn't want to be part of the rebellion. Like question everybody, figure out what they want, but he's like trying to like appeal to her to like not buy into the whole rebellion thing, and to like maybe not trust District 13. And in the book, she sees that in the hospital with Finnick.
Yeah,
her and Finnick see it together, and then they pretend they didn't see it. Like Finnick's like, pretend you didn't see that, and she does, and then ultimately she ends up getting mad at Gale because Gale never tells her about it. Like she pretends she didn't see it.
She knows that he saw it, but he never says anything.
He never says anything about it, and then that causes a bunch of tension, because she's like, why didn't you've been lying to me? Why didn't you tell me about that? What the Propo PETA did, blah blah blah, and he's like, well, we didn't know, and it creates all this tension. And the movie kind of shortcuts all of that by just having both of them see that together, and then have vastly different reactions to it, and then that's what causes the tension. Like she's feeling for PETA, and he's like, he's a traitor, and I felt like they kind of shortcut it in a way that makes a lot of sense, and also just feels like it works, and without like the extra layers of like.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it does truncate things in a nice way that also works for Gale's character.
Yeah.
Especially since we lost the fight about the prep team.
Yeah.
Since they're not in the movie.
Yeah.
I was a little sad that we didn't get to see her take Finnick to the woods.
Yes.
Because I think that could have been a really nice, like, quiet and meaningful scene between them.
Yeah, because she does take him out in the woods in the book. So when they go to District 12 for the second time to film some more propos, this one in the movie, they change it up. And they don't change it up because this is what happens. They have Gale in the book recount the bombing of District 12. But in the book, we don't like get like a blow by blow analysis from him. Like Katniss wanders off to go do her own thing while he's, from my memory, like she goes somewhere else while he's filming this with them. But in the movie, we stay with him and she stays with them and listens to him recount all of this. And this is also appears to be in the movie the first time Katniss is hearing all of this. In the book, she already knows what has happened to District 12. Gale told her about it or something already. So she knows all the details of what happened. But it seems like in the movie, this is her first time sort of hearing this all come out. And I really like that change. I really like sort of Katniss's reaction to hearing all this, being able to see that for the first time. And then also just watching Gale go through all of it. I thought Liam Hemsworth did a really good job in this scene. And I thought it was just the way they go through all of it makes it and getting this story instead of from Katniss's sort of like head about what happened to 12, having Gale literally walk us through it was just a much more effective way, affecting way of doing that. And like this is a note I had because I was wondering if the movie was ever going to clarify this. We find out in the book, like in the very beginning, that 90% of the people from District 12 are dead, died in the bombing, which is like crazy. And he does at this point in the movie say that that like 800 people of the 10,000 survived or whatever. And I really liked that whole scene with him recounting the bombing of 12. I thought that was great.
We talked a lot about the hanging tree scene in the last section because it was better in the book, pretty close, but a little better in the book. There was one little change that I wanted to mention, which I don't think was in the book. If it was, I missed it.
I don't think it was.
Which was Plutarch mentioning that for the propo, when they made their propaganda piece out of her singing this song, he changed Necklace of Rope to Necklace of Hope.
Yeah. That was a good Plutarch moment. That reminded me of the other like gross Plutarch moments from the book. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a fun little detail. And how proud he is of it.
Yeah.
He's yeah. Yep. So I really loved the bridge storming scene. We talked about how I didn't love the opening of that scene with the song and how it felt like Les Mis. But when they actually get down to the bridge and they're like running out of the darkness across the bridge and the people and they're getting like mowed down and falling down and like trying to drag the bomb into it's super harrowing and just that scene is super gripping in a similar way that the lumberjack scene from earlier was, where the movie doesn't shy away, and it's something we actually get to see because we're not stuck in Katniss's perspective. It doesn't shy away from showing the human cost of revolution, of what it takes and how many people have to die in order to do something like blow up a bridge or blow up a dam in order to cripple the capital so that they and I thought that scene, like the specifically the bridge part of that scene and the way it's shot was haunting and beautiful and amazing. And I just like being able to see more of the broader scope of the revolution away from Katniss's singular perspective. So I really like that scene. I also really like that after when the bombing, the assault of District 13, that it starts before they get down into the bunker.
Yes.
Like they're on their way to the bunker.
Yeah, they're on like the big
hitting.
ramps going down, 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 down.
Yeah, and they're on their way down, and I like that it kind of ups the stakes. Like the lights go out while they're all going down the stairs, and like the sprinklers are going off or pipes are leaking, one of the two. and it's just super chaotic, and like Katniss has like a PTSD attack in the middle of it, which I thought was kind of interesting. Kind of visualizing that, getting us another moment of her dealing with that. Like she like crouches down and like starts freaking out, and somebody picks her up and she kind of has to power through it and that sort of thing. I thought that was all cool. I thought the countdown at the end where they're like, once Gale and Peeta show up, or Gale and Prim show up, the like 5, 4 was a little silly.
A little bit.
A little silly,
bit.
but
I get it.
But yeah. But overall I liked that, the way the movie kind of upped the stakes of it.
I did think the movie upped the stakes of that entire like part of this. And in a good way, both by having it start while they were going down there, and then like her looking up and like seeing a crack.
The cracks. And also just having it be like constant more bombs. In the book, it's described as like a bomb every few hours. Yeah. And they're just dropping like a few really big bombs is what it sounds like in the book. Whereas the movie, it's more of like a traditional like bombardment of just like continuous like bombing on them. I don't know.
It made me think of like when you watch something about like World War II in London and like the London Blitz. Yeah, that's what it made me think of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think so they make Finnick's propo at the end during the raid, like it's just him giving a speech, which I thought worked better. In the movie we talked about, or in the book we talked about how like him and Katniss record a thing and they edit it, and then she records a whole speech about how like Peeta saved her when she was starving with the bread. Yeah. And then Finnick goes and gives his whole speech, and then she mentions afterwards when she watches the edited version that like they barely use any of her story because Finnick's is just it's
so much more
important and more interesting
and tantalizing.
And it just and so when that happened, it felt like the movie deciding, okay, well, we'll just make Finnick's thing be the thing just made more sense. It's like, why do a thing where we're setting up this like, because Katniss goes out and like bears her heart about this story, and then we're like, nah, it doesn't really matter. It's not that important. Let's just use Finnick's thing. It's like, well, I don't know. That felt. I mean, there's a thing there of like, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. Like Finnick's story being, like her very heart bearing, like her bearing her heart and telling the story about Peeta. Was very tough for her, but then ultimately it like getting a few seconds is I think there's a point there in terms of like how like news and stuff and how media is. But that being said, I think it's cleaner to just be like Finnick's gonna go do his thing. Yeah. And that's the focus.
I also liked that it's more than just a distraction. Yeah. Because in the book, they want it to be like a distraction so that everybody in the Capitol is going to want to tune in to hear what Finnick has to say. But in the movie, they're also using that to like jam signals and things like that in the Capitol. Yeah. And I really liked getting to see the rescue mission. Yeah. We were talking while we were watching the movie, like right before this scene, we were talking about how we thought they were going to do this. Yes. And you called it. You were right.
I had this in the movie, nailed it, but it is actually more accurate better in the movie because it isn't what they do in the book. But it is exactly what I expected. Is in the book we get a brief description of the rescue plan after it happens. They kind of go through like, oh, it involved gas and night vision, whatever. They like go through all like some of the details in like one paragraph, but not much. And I wrote as I was reading that, I was like, I wonder how the movie's going to show this because Katniss isn't a part of it. Like she's not there. And I'm like, I don't think they're going to have her go. I don't think they're going to make that big of a change. And I'm like, okay, what I'm imagining is we're going to get like a montage, like a back and forth cut with the propo playing and Finnick's speech and footage from the raid, and that is pretty much exactly what happens. Although Katniss is watching it, and we get it from like a first-person perspective. But going back and forth between him and the raid, back and forth was exactly what I was expecting. And so I had it in the movie, nailed it, because I was like, in my brain, that's what I was envisioning reading the book, even though that's not what the book describes. But I thought that was a great decision that they made in the movie, and I really liked a lot about what they did with the raid there. Specifically, I like just seeing the rescue mission overall, but there's one shot in particular where when they first arrive to the building, which this is also different. The movie change, which is I actually thought was kind of interesting from my memory. I don't know if we ever know exactly where they're holding PETA in the book.
I thought they did mention that it was in the tribute
Was
center.
it the tribute center?
I think they mentioned
maybe
that.
Okay, maybe it was, and I just forgot that.
Or I might be imagining that.
No, that might be, but that's what it is in the movie, and that might have been what it was in the book. I couldn't recall. But we see them, going to the tribute center, and there's this great shot where they cut the power and all the lights go out, and the hovercraft is hovering over the tribute center, and you see them all rappel down from the hovercraft into the building, and it looks so fucking cool. It's such a cool shot. This movie did. Here's the thing. Remember how I talked about in the first movie? I think it was the Catching Fire, which is funny because it's the same freaking director.
Yeah.
Maybe got a different DP or other people involved who just had a better vision. But this movie actually did have some of those big, striking visual moments that I wanted. Like the shot from the side of the bridge with everybody storming across it, getting mowed down, the people going up into the trees. Again, neither of those are from the book, to be fair. But and this, I guess, isn't either, honestly.
Technically, yeah.
Because we don't know, But that shot from a big, long shot, and we see them rappelling down into the thing. I love those big, tableau shots. I live for them. They're so cool. And this movie has a couple really good ones. And that one, whew, I was like, yeah, that's dope.
So I put this line here, and you think it's in the book.
I'm 99% sure. Hold on.
I don't remember it being in the book, but you're probably right. But it was a Finnick line in the movie when he's talking about President Snow, and he says, "Poison, the perfect weapon for a snake."
Yeah, it is.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's on page 172. Yeah, it's just Katniss's literally that exact poison, the perfect weapon for a snake. It's just her thinking that. After
I like giving it to Finnick.
After she hears Finnick say that he poisons people.
Yeah.
She says poison, or she thinks poison the perfect weapon for a snake. But yeah, they give it to Finnick. I think it makes a lot of sense. I liked Coin's speech at the end, adding her big triumph speech. They're definitely setting up some stuff for part 2 here. They're using some authoritarian imagery that the book attaches to 13 and Coin. There's a moment in the movie where she's giving this speech and we get a shot from above her looking down, and all of the people tiny below her, and she's up on this giant pedestal giving this very, using visual film language to explore the growing power dynamic between the people and President Coin, and that sort of thing. And also, I wanted to know, is she intentionally a bad public speaker? I found her to be an incredibly mediocre and uninspiring public speaker. And I was wondering if that was on purpose or just not a good performance. You know what I mean? I couldn't decide if I felt like it might be on purpose a little bit. And we'll see. Again, it leans into maybe things in the second book or the second half. But I felt every time she gave a speech in this movie, I was like, God, she is not charismatic. She is not a good speaker.
I feel like it almost has to be a choice. It's an interesting choice, given that authoritarian dictators are often famously very good public speakers.
Not always, though, as we've learned in recent years.
Fair.
But very often, yes.
Yeah.
Or at least, but maybe not. And maybe that's the thing, is that maybe they're not all as good. I don't know, because I think even that sort of, I think I've heard, and I could be wrong, that idea that we have of authoritarian leaders, of them being sort of, known as being great orators and stuff, isn't necessarily maybe as true as we tend to think it is. It's, I'm not saying it's not. I just feel like I've heard specifically on Behind the Bastards, I think I've heard them mention in relation to certain dictators through history that they weren't actually maybe quite as good of public speakers as we've sort of mythologized them to be. And in fact, it was more so that it was less their silver tongue, bewitching the masses, and more so that the masses are just racist authoritarian
I
assholes.
mean, that
like
fits with the last 4 years.
yeah, like it's a little bit less often that the person is like some, you know, super charismatic, beguiling speaker, and more so that they're just saying things that people secretly kind of agree with.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could be wrong about that. And I was wondering if maybe that's, anyways. But the visual imagery of the speech is unmistakable of what we're setting up here, in terms of Coin and sort of the bend that we're taking. But my favorite thing about this speech was, because it's not in the book at all, or at least not yet, and maybe she gives a speech at some point. But this whole like triumph victory speech in rescuing Peeta was not part of rescuing them, was not part of the book. And I did love that big triumphant moment juxtaposed to Katniss coming across Peeta.
Yeah.
Did I say Peeta's speech? I meant Coin's. Whatever. I don't know what I said. But the juxtaposing Coin's big triumphant speech with Peeta.
With Katniss's personal horror.
Yes. Finding Peeta struggling and like losing his mind in his cell, essentially.
Yeah.
Tied down to his bed. Yeah, I thought that was very, very good. Really, really powerful stuff. And then my last note was there's a little scene between Coin and Katniss where Coin is kind of consoling Katniss.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a nice little scene. And I think it's, I don't even remember much of what is said. They just kind of have a little moment of, again, not camaraderie, but Coin is kind of like trying to console her, trying to like reach out to her. And Katniss seems to kind of accept it. And I think that is a good little scene to sort of juxtapose to where events go down the road. So without spoilers. Anyways, that was what we had for Better in the Movie. We got a big old long list for the movie. Nailed it. So let's get into it.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
So we open up on that scene you talked about in the beginning where she's like hiding in District 13. And one of the things that the very first thing we open up on is she's reciting this mantra, which is something she recites in the book, which is like, my name is Katniss Everdeen. I'm from District 12. I survived the Hunger Games twice, but like all these things that help ground herself and help her remember who she is. Because she's been having, since she got a concussion from Joanna knocking her out, she's kind of been kind of foggy, and this is like her thing. And I liked them including that little moment, more so for book readers than anything, because I don't know if it would really make sense to moviegoers why she's doing that.
Yeah, probably not.
Because in the book, we know that she's doing that to kind of center herself and remind her of who she is. And that scene kind of opens right up on 13, like violating her autonomy and like dragging her out of this hiding space that she's in, which I think, again, is interesting that then the movie goes on to sort of
very soften
13 to open on such a stark opposite of that was kind of an interesting choice. But
well, and I think the purpose of that was probably just to lean into that like unsettling mystery like, at the beginning.
Finnick having the breakdown and then being in the hospital the whole time, and his coping mechanism being tying knots with his little rope. They do that in the movie. We talked about Mahershala Ali is perfect as Boggs.
Chef's kiss.
Yes, so good. The look and feel of 13, apart from, again, them softening some of the elements of it, I thought the look and feel of it was what I imagined.
Yeah, it's all like these big giant underground rooms,
concrete and steel and bunkers, and they all dress in their identical jumpsuits and that sort of thing. So I thought that was pretty good. Speaking of Coin from earlier, I thought Julianne Moore is kind of exactly what you imagine. Yeah. When you read Coin's description in the book, she has that severity and like calculated coldness that I imagine for Coin. Although in the book, I imagine Coin's hair being shorter than
a little
Julianne's.
bit. Yeah.
Like I thought it was at her shoulders and it goes down.
It's a little longer in the movie, but I think they nailed the very uniformness of her hair that's described in the book, where it's all like the same length.
Exactly the same length.
Lays like perfectly
flat.
Yeah.
There is one thing that I thought was interesting, again, kind of going into the her description, one of the elements of her description, and I think they did give her contacts in the movie because in the book it's described that her eyes are gray, but not the kind of gray that the people from 12s are.
Mm-hmm.
It's like she specifically describes it as like the color has been sucked out, leaving only mush.
Yeah.
Which, again, I think that's clear foreshadowing for her character, but also kind of leans into some of the weird, like, socialism bad stuff that we talked about earlier. Like her soul has literally been sucked out and turned into gray mush by this, by the collectivism of 13 or whatever. District 12, when she finally goes to visit it, is...
Yeah, they nailed the smoking remains of District 12.
Yeah.
Right down to her, like, stepping on a skull and seeing all of the, like, melted bodies of people trying to get out.
Yeah, on the street. Yeah, it's just... And there's a great shot in the movie where she walks up over this edge and the camera pans up and over and there's just bodies, mangled bodies as far as you can see. It's horrifying. This movie does one of the better jobs compared to the first two of not shying away from some of the brutality, at least to some extent.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that is still standing in District 12, though, is Victor's Village, which we see in the movie. Although we don't get the Katniss thinking about how it's probably so that if they have to send anybody there, they'll have somewhere nice to stay.
Yeah, if the Capitol has to send anybody out, they'll have a nice residence. We get the scene of her going to her house in Victor's Village and collecting all of her stuff. She gets like her dad's jacket, which hasn't been set up in the movies at all, but a little thing for book readers when she grabs the leather jacket off the peg. And then she also rescues Buttercup.
Yeah, she stuffs a cat in a bag.
Yeah.
Which, trying to imagine putting either of our cats in a bag and it does not compute.
No, would not go well. It's funny too because Buttercup does not like Katniss all that much. Like, she tolerates her at times, and the idea of a cat who doesn't like somebody letting that person stuff them in a bag is... Although, to be fair, I mean, Buttercup was probably like, things kind of suck around here. I'll go wherever. You're taking me out of here. So then she goes and explores around the rest of the house, and she gets into like the study, and she sees, or it might be her bedroom.
I think it's the study.
Yeah, and she finds a single rose left on her dresser. In the movie, it's like on a table or something like that, in a vase of dead flowers. There's like a single living rose in it. And I thought this moment was so classic third movie opening to me. Again, if we had opened on the desolation of District 12, like we talked about, and then I for sure thought we were going to open in 12 with her in 12, boom, reveal, 12's devastated. Like black, hard cut, bombed out 12 with a tiny Katniss standing in like that was that was 100% what I thought the movie was going to open on. Just like nothing, boom, big wide landscape shot, 12 is rubble and Katniss is standing in the middle of it. And then eventually she keeps walking around. We're cutting back and forth to kind of setting up 13. And then the moment in the movie, the moment before the opening title card that says Mockingjay Part 1 is Finnick in the hospital saying like, I wish we were all dead, which I think works. But what I was envisioning was we're cutting, blah, 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 blah. We do that for like the first, 5 or 10 minutes. And then she walks into the study. She turns around. She sees something on the dresser and she walks. And I'm imagining the camera slow pushing in and then kind of arriving, kind of how it did with the berries at the end of the first movie on the bowl with Seneca Crane, where it kind of pushes in and kind of goes down. I was imagining that over to the rose, and then she walks over and picks it up and looks at it and knows, and then we cut to Mockingjay Part 1. That's what I was envisioning. I was like, that's got to be it, wasn't it? But if they ever want to do remakes of this movie, they know who they got my. I'll give you my number.
Get on it, Hollywood. I thought the movie nailed Peeta's first TV appearance, where he's interviewing with Caesar. I did think that the reaction everyone had to it felt a little extreme compared to what's described in the book. Yeah, because in the movie, everybody starts like shouting.
Like, traitor! In the movie, in the book, they're just kind of like grumbling. Yeah, it's a little over the top, and they had to play it up a little bit.
I also thought that it nailed the conversation between Katniss and Prim the night before when she's still kind of deciding that she's going to be the Mockingjay.
Yeah, and that was a nice little scene in the book of, and in particular, the movie keeps in the line of Prim being like, yeah, I can keep secrets or something like that.
Yeah.
And kind of signifying the coming of age of Prim and how their relationship is changing past like older daughter, like child, or not older sister, like child sister, more
we're progressing past Katniss as a surrogate parent and getting more into them having like a sisterly relationship as equals.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try not to dwell on it because I hope I'm wrong, but boy, the first half of this book really just focused in on how great Prim is becoming.
Yeah.
And what a great person she's maturing into. We're gonna not think about it. I don't know what happens in the second half of this book.
Yep. So when she goes in, we talked about how we talked about her presenting her list of demands for command in order to be the Mockingjay is pretty much the same. But there's one little moment that I thought that I was glad that the movie kept in. Obviously, they got rid of Fulvia, but in the book, Fulvia and Plutarch have this little whispering bout during Katniss like fierily giving her demands, and they're like, they turn to each other like, that's the Mockingjay, there she is, look at that, like they're like whispering to each other. And Plutarch does that in the movie, like he's like, there's our Mockingjay right there, look at that, like he's like envisioning the propos as she's giving that speech, and I like that. Coin adds afterwards, Coin goes out and gives a speech saying, yeah, we're gonna pardon Peeta and all those things. But then at the end of her speech, she adds a little addendum that if Katniss violates any of the rules or doesn't complete her end of the bargain, all of this is null and void. And I like them keeping that part in because I thought that was an important moment. Again, it kind of strikes a little similarity between the way that like Snow sort of manipulates people sort of in the public light and that sort of thing. I thought that was a good moment. I was glad they kept that specific moment in. The Mockingjay armor is, other than the hood, is pretty much what I imagine.
Spot on,
yeah. I mean, they don't go into great detail in the book of what it looks like, but it's black and body armor kind of looks like yeah. And we just have the sort of bluntly being told that Cinna is dead. We don't ever. It's one of those. This is one of those movies that breaks the rule of like modern movie and television, which is if you don't see them die on camera, they're not dead. Yeah. And in this one, seemingly, Cinna just dies off camera, and we never, never to be heard from again. Well, that's not true. I mean,
but she does get to see his drawings.
Yes.
Of the Mockingjay costume, and he did and he has "I'm still betting on you" written on the drawings.
Yeah. As they're getting ready to film the first propo with her, and she's in her armor and her makeup and stuff, Finnick has this line, but they give it to Effie in the film, which is fine.
I think it works for Effie.
Yeah, I think it works for Effie, where she says to her, they'll either want to kill you, kiss you, or be you.
Yeah.
And that was definitely a line that was, especially delivered by Finnick, that was edited by Suzanne Collins for younger audiences. There's no way that line wasn't, they'll either want to kill you, fuck you, or be you.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way that wasn't what the line was initially, and then they changed it to kiss you.
And then after her terrible blue screen performance, we get Haymitch with the slow clap.
Yep.
And that, my friends, is how a revolution dies.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great introduction for Haymitch. It's in the same introduction in both. Well, I guess he's kind of in. I can't remember, but it's basically his introduction in the movie and in the book. And she mentions in the movie that he isn't looking well.
Yeah,
and which was something described in the book because he's now sober.
Yeah, because they don't allow alcohol.
They don't allow anything. And so yeah, he's like thinner and kind of shriveled and doesn't look like he's getting on so good.
I really thought the movie did a good job with the scene where Haymitch has everyone come up with times that Katniss inspired them or made them feel something.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That scene is like, this is another one of those scenes similar to the one in Catching Fire where Finnick and her first meet, where it's like every word is like line for like literally
they just
identical.
like copy pasted
that
from the
scene.
book and made it look like a script.
Yeah, because he literally says every word that I recalled from the book in that moment. And then, yeah, at the end of it, he recommends throwing her into combat so that they can actually get some good footage.
And then the exchange with Coin and Katniss, where she says, "And what if you're killed? Make sure you get it on camera."
Yep. And then, speaking of getting it on camera, we're introduced to the film crew as they're getting ready to go out to District 8. And that consists of Cressida, Pollux, and Avox, and then her assistant, who I can't remember his name. Or no, sorry, Pollux and Castor.
Yeah.
Pollux is an Avox. Which, do they even say Avox in the movie, or do they just say the Capitol cut his tongue out? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
Because I remember them saying they cut his tongue out, but I don't remember if they say.
Well, because
I think they do say
the
Avox.
movies did a pretty bad job of setting that up.
Oh, that's the thing. That's why I was wondering, because they had never mentioned Avox before this.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if they used the word Avox here, because people would be like, what? Or if they... My bet is that they said Avox and then explained it.
Yeah, probably.
But then whoever Cressida's assistant is. But yeah, also, so this is fun. Pollux, the Avox, is played by Foggy Nelson from the Daredevil series. Also, he's Fulton or whatever from the Mighty Ducks series. I think it's Fulton. I can't remember. Whatever. One of the main characters, kind of, in the Mighty Ducks movies. But he's Foggy Nelson in Daredevil. And then Castor is the dude from The Expanse, who I can never remember the character's name, but he's one of the main crew members from The Expanse. So that was interesting. I did not realize he was in this. And then, yeah, Natalie Dormer plays Cressida. And she does do a very good job as Cressida.
Yes. And I thought she nailed, like, the look, too.
Yeah, so in the book, apparently... her head is entirely shaved.
Yeah.
And she has tattoos all over it. And I read in I don't think I mentioned this, but I read when I was doing research for the prequel, that it was Natalie Dormer's idea to shave half of her head and do the tattoos like that, which I thought works.
It looks cool.
It looks cool. Yeah. It makes sense.
And that kind of like half shaved like undercut was very in then too.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, I'm in love with Natalie Dormer in another movie. Oh no. Again. So Katniss getting to 8 and seeing the chaos of the aftermath of the bombing in the hospital. It's very vividly described in the book. Like the smells and the sounds and everything. And specifically when they walk into the hospital, they have all the dead bodies like in the the foyer.
Like in the hallway when they're coming in. The hallway
before they get in, and that's the same in the book. And there's a moment in the movie where you see Katniss like covering her nose, and because it's specifically described how terrible it smells in the book. And so I thought they did a pretty good job of kind of capturing the horror of that like field hospital and how awful it would be. And then when she gets in there, everybody recognizes her and is inspired by her. And she mentions that she's really glad she washed all the makeup off like Boggs recommended, because she's like, it just wouldn't feel super wrong in this setting if I was still wearing all my makeup. So the hospital gets destroyed. One of the little details, and the movie doesn't allude to this, but I thought it was a really interesting detail in the book. And it translates to the movie, where if you read the book, you would see this, but it doesn't. If you didn't read the book, you wouldn't get this. But so Gale's a minor, and there's a moment where after they blow up all the ships and they're running back to the hospital because they know the hospital got hit, and they get around the corner and they see that it's like on fire and collapsing, and she's like trying to she's thinking about like going in to try to help people, and she looks at Gale and he doesn't move. And she realizes, she's like, well, if Gale's not doing anything to try to help, that's a lost cause, because Gale, being a minor, like, he knows this kind of situation, but also like they try to help until they know like it's completely a lost cause, and the fact that he's not trying to do anything makes her realize, like that, the way that hit was like, oof. And that is what transpires in the movie. It's just we don't get her inner monologue talking us through it, but it works.
And then we get her big speech. If we burn, you burn with us, which is word for word.
It's all like
no
exactly
reason to change
no
any
reason
of
to
that.
change that. No.
It's a great speech.
Yep. And then the propo that they produce from that is pretty spot on to the description from the book, apart from maybe Claudius Templesmith's voiceover.
I really hated the slogan at the end, though. Because in the movie, it ends with, join the Mockingjay, join the fight.
Yeah.
And the book just ends with, if we burn, you burn with us.
Yeah.
Coming up on screen again. And, like, I get that it's supposed to be an overt marketing. Like, that's what we're supposed to get from watching this.
Right.
Like, oh, this is a marketing tactic.
Yeah.
So I understand the movie's slogan, but at the same time, it was so cringy that it took me completely out of the moment.
Yeah. It's also kind of counterintuitive because the people, Cressida and Plutarch and in the book Fulvia and all them are so competent at producing propaganda that they wouldn't end on such a cheesy, like,
well, and it doesn't make any sense to me too, because they're trying to get people to join a rebellion, but that kind of like join the Mockingjay, join the fight, to me it reads more like it feels like a World War II era war effort,
and that's what they're going for.
And I get that, but I don't think it works.
No, I agree. Yes,
but I don't know if the point is that it wouldn't work. I didn't like it.
No, that is fair. The last little join the Mockingjay, I agree that part's dumb, but the rest of it is pretty much what we get in the book. Coin lets Katniss and Gale go hunting, which is one of the things that they bargained for in the book. And I like they do this earlier in the book than they do in the movie. I like giving them this time here after the big battle at 8. They go hunting before the battle in the book. And I like giving them some quiet time there and kind of nice decompression, like them sitting by the river and stuff. I thought that was good. I mean, again, it's in the book. It's just kind of changed when it happened.
The second time they go to District 12, Katniss kisses Gale when they're in the house. And they have this little kind of conversation about it where he acknowledges that the only time she ever pays attention to him like that is when he's in pain. Yeah. And I thought that the movie did a good job translating that scene. Yeah. Yeah. The only thing from that scene that was missing is that when they kiss, she has this, I think it's this moment. It might have been from an earlier moment or something, but there's a moment where they kiss and she says, we taste of heat, ashes, and misery. And that line, we taste of heat, ashes, and misery, surprising flavor for such a gentle kiss. Which is a great, this is a great line. Obviously no way to really translate that into the movie at all, but I just, that's such a great line. And we'll talk about it here real quick, because we both had this moment in the, and maybe it would make more sense to talk about in this part 2, but we have it here now, is I've heard people say that these movies, like one of the main criticisms I've heard of these movies is that they focused too much on the relationship and turned it too much into like, they wanted too hard to be Twilight and sort of leaned too hard into the love triangle aspect. That was always the primary criticism that I had heard about these films as well. Yeah. And we both, and this was that moment where I turned to you and said that, and I said I'd always heard that, and then I was like, I don't think they did. I don't feel like they did, because I'm struggling to come up with any additional love triangle stuff that's not just a translation of something that happened in the book. Yeah. And maybe I'm forgetting something. But I couldn't come up with anything. Every scene that is a like relationship focused scene in the movie has a direct corollary in the book. If it's not a pure rips, like if it's not a direct scene from the book, a direct like lift. this one though, this is where you kissed me scene. Yeah. That's a direct scene lift from the book. If it's not that, almost every other scene has like it's like they took like an element of this scene and just moved it somewhere else or whatever. But even then, I felt like these movies didn't remotely focus. I almost felt like the books focused on the relationships more
more.
Yeah,
than the
because we're
movies
in
did.
Katniss's head.
And we can hear
all of her confused thoughts about what she's feeling.
Yeah, whereas in the movie we just get some of the like physical manifestations of those scenes, and it's I was blown away. And again, I don't think it could change much. There's so much has to happen in the second movie plot-wise that I don't think we're going to be spending a ton of time. We wrap up loose ends obviously with like the love triangle and stuff, but like that criticism, I was 3 movies in, I'm like, I don't know where that criticism came from. And if you levied that criticism, I'm not saying you're wrong. I would just like to hear why, or like what it is that makes you feel, or did at least make you feel.
Let me see your bullet points.
Yeah.
For what your evidence is of that.
Because to me it feels like if anything, the movie's focused on it less than the books. And I will say this, I think the only argument to be made is that because the movies in relation to the books are shorter, like page length wise, essentially, like the movies are considerably shorter than the books, and they cut a lot of stuff out, that the proportion of time that the relationship stuff takes up
a higher percentage
is a higher percentage in the movies than it is in the books. But I bet it's not.
So it feels like more.
But I still don't even think it's that much more, because I think there is more scenes of relationships and more moments of relationship stuff in the book than there is in the movie, but there's also just a lot more book. So like I wouldn't be, if you told me the math came out that the percentage of time spent with relationship stuff in the movie was slightly higher than it was in the book, I don't think I'd be surprised, but it would surprise me if it was a lot more, because to me it feels pretty close in terms of like plot and thematic and other relevant stuff versus like her relationship stuff. The proportion feels pretty close to me in both the books and the movies. I don't know.
Let us know what you think.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was something that I thought was interesting. So the Propos battle broadcast where they're going back and forth. This is the second, or no, this is the one before the warning, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
This is the one where Pete is going to give the warning, and BT is like hacking in, and we're going back and forth between the Capitol propaganda and the rebellion propaganda. And one of the things that I thought the movie really captured in this moment is, in the book it's described, everybody's like, cheering for BT whenever he gets the rebellion propaganda in. But like Katniss and Haymitch and Finnick are all kind of like just because they're worried about people. The thing that I thought the movie really captured is that Katniss in this moment she's watching this and she's like hanging on every word Peeta is saying. And anytime the rebellion propaganda comes in, she's actually like annoyed. Yeah. Because she's like, they're like cutting off Peeta, and she's like, she's desperate for every crumb of like, seeing him alive and, that sort of thing. And like anything he has to say. And I thought this scene did a really good job capturing that dynamic of, the whole rebellion being like, we gotta trying to get their message out, and her being like, I just care about him. Like I don't care about the rest of this.
We get a nice quiet moment with Prim while they're down in the bunkers during the bombings, where she tells Katniss that she's gonna be training to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a nice little moment, and she's like, they're training me to be a doctor. Yeah, it's cool.
And then Buttercup chases a flashlight.
Crazy cat game.
To everyone's amusement.
Yep. I was wondering if they were going to include that, but they did. And specifically, they also included the moment where Katniss realizes, this is what the Capitol's doing with Peeta. Mm-hmm. She has that dawning realization.
And then her conversation with Finnick down there was also pretty spot on.
Yeah, another Finnick scene that they kind of kept verbatim, not quite as close as the other one from Catching Fire, but one line specifically that they kept that I thought was really important, and clearly the screenwriter did too. Finnick says, this is about Peeta, you do love him. I'm not saying in which way. Maybe you don't know yourself. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was obviously, with everything we've discussed about Katniss's reading as Ace and all these different things, I thought that line and keeping that line in the movie was really important. I don't know if the rest of the movie has the context for it necessarily, but I was
Yeah.
glad they kept that line in because that line stuck out to me when I was reading the book. And it's one of those scenes that's nice because Finnick's a really interesting character, and he becomes more interesting in this book even than the second book. And the way he sort of sees and understands Katniss, I think, is really interesting because he's so different.
Yeah.
But also he understands her in a way that I find really compelling. We find out that Peeta's warning bought them like 10 minutes worth of time, which ultimately we find out in the book. And I don't actually know. Well, we know they do say that it bought us 10 minutes worth of time, but they don't say in the movie. Katniss realizes in the book that 10 minutes essentially saved Gale and Prim's life.
Yeah.
That if they hadn't had that warning, they would have not made it into the bunker and they would have died. In the movie, Coin says, hey, Peeta's warning bought us 10 minutes, and I'll remember that, and kind of has like a, I'm thankful that he did that or whatever. But in the book, there's this really, sad moment where Katniss feels guilty and is like racked with guilt, knowing that she'll never be able to repay Peeta again.
Yeah.
For saving, Gale and Prim's life. Just another thing that she won't be able to once again, she could live 1,000 lives and never deserve him or whatever.
I thought the movie nailed when they climb out and they're in the giant crater filled with roses. Very visually impactful. President Snow is such a drama queen.
He absolutely is, yes. She's all about the theatrics.
The theatrics, the aesthetic.
Yep. Absolutely. And I thought, specifically the way it's revealed in the movie was really effective. It worked really well. Gale volunteers his tribute.
He does, though.
He absolutely does. He goes to rescue. They're sending a rescue mission to get Peeta, and Gale was the first one to volunteer, even though he doesn't really like Peeta.
Even though I feel like he wouldn't have the kind of training that they need.
Yeah, we did
to
talk
do
about this,
an operation like that. Because I mean, he's a capable dude, but he's not military.
He's not a soldier. He's a miner who can shoot a bow. But apparently, he's like Spec Ops now. He's like clearing. Now, to be fair, they've been at 13 for a while, so he could have been
fair
training.
Enough. Yeah, he could have been.
He picked it up quick or whatever. But the whole thing where Finnick's story about how the Capitol was, sex trafficking all the champions, and they would kill your family members. And it's funny. It's one of those things that it seems obvious in retrospect. But because I remember there was a moment in Catching Fire where I made a joke about Finnick fucking his way through the Capitol.
Yeah.
And because that's how it's described in the second book. And it's one of those things that this book really pulls the rug out from under you in regards to your perception of those events in a really effective way that made me really like, just like, and again, in retrospect, seems obvious based on everything we know about the Capitol.
Yeah.
And how it operates. It's like, obviously that would be what would be going on. But I thought that was really, again, I don't know if it's quite as explicit in the movie. They don't go quite into the detail, and it's a little harder to track because we're jumping back and forth between an action scene and the speech. That's the only thing that makes it a little tougher, but it still works. It's still good. And including him divulging all the secrets of how Snow poisoned his way to the top and that he drinks the poison himself, which is why his mouth bleeds.
Yeah. So now the smell of blood on his breath and also the red champagne.
Yes, we get our
from the last movie makes sense.
Yes, the blood in the glass was not just light; it was in fact blood. And in case it wasn't clear, when he's poisoning people, he also drinks the poison. He takes an antidote so he doesn't die, but it still causes like lesions and stuff in his mouth.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't
sores that never heal.
Yep.
So says Finnick.
Yep.
Although, how much backwash is he letting back into his champagne glass?
Yeah, that's
gross,
a lot.
Sir.
Yeah,
gross.
Yeah, that's an awful lot of backwash.
He's just like swishing it and spitting it back into the glass.
Yeah. Yep. Annie and Finnick reunite. They have a reuniting moment. And in the book, Katniss thinks to herself of how jealous she is of the certainty of their relationship. And I thought that was, again, an important moment for her character and her turmoil about what she wants and her identity and all that sort of thing and her relationships. We get that scene and we do get a look that I think translates in the movie when she looks at them. But again, we don't know what she's thinking. We can just assume based on, so it's not as explicit. But I think if you're reading it right, I think that is sort of the look that she gives when they kind of embrace each other.
And then PETA goes for the throat.
Oh yeah, chokes her to death. Almost.
Almost real close.
Yeah.
If not for Boggs, who knocks him out with a chair.
Knocks him unconscious. And that would have been, and my note here was, holy cow, because it goes to black, and I thought the credits were going to roll, and I was going to stand up and applaud. I was like, that is one hell of an ending if the credits roll here.
That would have been amazing,
Would have
honestly.
been incredible. And so that's what I was hoping was going to happen. It doesn't. We get a few more scenes. According to Shelby, she watched the special features. That was actually the original plan.
Interesting.
Was they originally were going that was the original idea, was knock them out, roll credits, like that's the end. And then eventually they decided against it. And apparently it's hotly debated on the internet of what, which ending people prefer. I do like the last scene of this movie.
Yeah, I do too.
Like with her with the speech and with Katniss seeing PETA in the bed. I like that, but man, that
would have been a very effective ending.
For the impact and for the just the WTF moment of the theater just, oh God, would have been so good. I would have done. Give me executive producer power. I'm rubber stamping that roll credits after Boggs knocks him out, but.
And then we get an explanation of what's happened to him.
Yeah.
And what hijacking is.
Yeah. Yep. And then we do find out that they letting them go, and Snow letting them take PETA out was because, again, I read the next couple chapters in the book, and it is explained. Boggs is even with all of our preparations, it was way too easy. If we hadn't rescued him tonight, they probably would have dropped him off on our doorstep next week to kill you, or so that so that was in fact the plan. That wasn't the movie trying to add some weird drama or stakes that wasn't there. That is in fact what was going on. So all right, that's it for all of our better in segments. We have a few odds and ends before we get to the final verdict.
So we mentioned in the prequel episode that the costume designer who worked on the last film left.
Yeah, to go do Gone Girl.
Yeah, to do Gone Girl. And I was initially puzzled by that, but now upon seeing this movie, I feel like the District 13 costumes are pretty dull compared to the first two movies.
Yeah.
So I guess I get it.
Really the only fun costume, not the only, but the main fun costume is Katniss's armor.
Yeah. And everybody else just wears the same gray jumpsuit.
It's jumpsuits and stuff. So yeah, it's not a lot going on there for sure. So we mentioned in the prequel that Jennifer Lawrence cut her hair before this movie and is wearing a wig for all of this movie and the next one, I believe. But yeah,
I actually I remember when she did the pixie cut and everybody was upset about it.
It's a pretty obvious wig.
Yeah.
It's not distractingly
bad.
It's not horrible,
but it is a wig.
I think even if I hadn't known that fact, I might have realized that was a wig. It's pretty apparently a wig, but yeah. Which is, it's whatever.
There's a specific line that Effie has that I thought was funny. She says to Katniss, we'll make you the best dressed rebel in history. And the movie plays it as a comforting line in that moment, which I get because it's coming from Effie, but it still tickled me because I'm like, oh yeah, that's a thing that Katniss has always cared deeply about.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I noticed this time, which I don't know if I noticed as much in the previous movies, is how much the visual motif, specifically the costumes for District 11, lean into some vaguely problematic caricatures and tropes for Southern black farmers.
Yeah.
Particularly of a certain time period, like Reconstruction and slave times. they all have, we see a shot of them in like the square, and I don't remember it being so overt in the and maybe I'm wrong.
I felt like it wasn't quite as overt in the last
they're all
one.
dressed like the dude from Song of the South in this one. And
like overalls and straw
hats in a way that, and so like there's lots of things, like, so District 11, we talked at length in previous episodes about, I actually think that overall what Collins is doing with 11 is like a very progressive idea of sort of because this whole thing's about class and the class disparity and that sort of thing, but then within that still acknowledging racial disparities and how 11, a predominantly black district, faces discrimination and horrible shit that like District 12 doesn't, which is an equally poor district, but they're all white people, like, you know, mostly white people, that sort of thing. But yeah, that characterization felt, I was like, wait,
I think it's something that they should have given way more thought to.
Yeah.
Because you can see a similar type of shorthand, like visual shorthand in other districts, like the lumberjacks, for example, all look like very like stereotypical,
well, they look like lumberjacks. Yeah.
And I think they should have given that way more thought.
It's just it's especially because it's 1,000 years in the future or whatever, and the fact that they look like turn of the century, like, you know, like 1900s reconstruction or whatever. Like, like I said, they all look like I can't remember the character's name from Song of the South. Like they're dressed like exactly like that character, and I was just like, that seems. Like, we get it. We see that they're all black people. They don't need to be dressed like slaves from the American South. Like, I don't know. That felt a little weird to me. Maybe, I don't know. Anyways, my whole point was I'd like to hear a discussion on that. We actually watched a video about Rue from a YouTube channel about like Rue and the whole controversy over her being black and stuff. And in that video, the video's writer and narrator, I guess, mentioned offhandedly about District 11 and some problematic stuff, and like maybe that's a whole nother video. And we both were kind of like, we at the time weren't like, I had not gleaned any super problematic stuff about 11. In fact, I thought it was maybe like veering the other direction of being actually pretty progressive, but I don't know if this is what they were referring to or not. But I did think that I don't know. They should have thought about that a little more, and maybe not.
Maybe
like
even
the most
maybe not.
Easy, like, I don't know.
Okay, so I cannot stop trying to figure out where all of these districts are supposed to be, because we know that Panem is America.
Yeah,
and I cannot stop. I want a map so badly. And I'm like, okay, where the heck is District 13 supposed to be? Because it's got to be beyond Appalachia.
Yeah, I think...
Because Bonnie and Twill were going through 12 to get to 13.
Yeah, I think you're right. Didn't you... Wait, did you not...
Well, I had earlier, I was like, maybe it could be like the Pentagon?
It's Washington, D.C., 100%.
Washington, D.C., do they have... I was trying to think of like, where do they have nuclear weapons?
It's D.C., 100%.
Okay.
It's gotta be.
Because most of the nuclear weapons are like out west, right?
A lot of them, yeah. But I mean, the coasts have the nuclear weapons, yeah. But they're also everywhere.
So you think?
I think it's DC. It's also why they have the infrastructure for bunkers, and
fair enough.
I think it's supposed to be DC, yeah. At least that's my guess. Although they're not quite as close to the ocean as I would imagine. Well, I don't know. We don't ever see like.
Yeah, we only see kind of like forested area.
Yeah, and DC's inland a little bit. Whatever. I think it's 100% supposed to be DC. Yeah. Also, it's the place where the new push for a republic is coming from. I think it's 100% supposed to be DC. Would be my guess. Maybe like Philadelphia or something, but probably DC. That would be my guess. I think one of the things that the book does really effectively is the dueling tensions is sort of dealing with the dueling tension of lying to Katniss for the greater good versus how that violates her autonomy. Mm-hmm. It's really messy, and I think Suzanne Collins does a really good job making it clear that it's not like a cut and dry answer. Like, there's times where Gale and people lie to her and they like keep her out of the loop on stuff, and she always obviously they're lying to her and they're using her at times in a way that violates her autonomy, but I think it's also one of those, it does kind of come down to a really interesting distinction of like sometimes lying to her. And again, not things like overtly violating our autonomy, but things like lying to her, which is people lie to each other all the time for various reasons. And I don't think they're all the same level of degree of like taking somebody's autonomy away. They are to some extent, but when you lie, but point being that like they lie to her a lot of times for things. And I think we're supposed to see that as a violation of like her agency, which it is to some extent. But I think the fact that they kind of have to lie to her sometimes in order for certain things to transpire in order to overthrow a literal fascist dictatorship. I don't know. I think that Collins gives a balanced accounting of both how that sucks and is terrible, but also it is what it is. I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I because that was the thing that happens throughout this book, you know, where she gets upset about not being told things or not knowing things. And it's, I don't know. I think it's never, Collins doesn't come down hard on like one side or the other of which is correct, in my opinion, because I think they're both right.
Yeah.
In
it's a very interesting exploration of that issue.
Yeah.
My last note here, I thought this was funny when they're sneaking into the Capitol to rescue PETA. It's dark because the power's out, and they're sneaking in their hovercraft, which is super loud.
Yeah. Yes.
I thought it was funny when they hear it.
Silent hovercraft.
We know the hovercrafts are loud. We've heard them.
Yeah. To be fair, they don't. Ultimately, when we find out that they're letting them. But
know,
yes,
but
initially, yeah.
They make this big thing about like, oh, it's dark, so we can get in. They won't see us.
There's a jet hovering over your fucking building. Yeah.
But it's dark, so it's fine, guys.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Speaking of hovercrafts, my last note for odds and ends, and this is only in the book, is there's this whole part. I truly, and I mentioned this earlier, I truly do not understand the technology in this universe. It's my only problem, because overall I really do like the world building, but the technology and what they do and don't have in this universe is so wild to me. There's this moment in the book where Plutarch is reminiscing about how back in the day they had fighter jets and satellites and drones and certain missile, like he's going on and on about all these weapons, like our modern day weapons that we have in the world. And he's like, oh, they had all this cool stuff. And I'm like, bro, you have hovercrafts. That's what's confusing to me, is that if you have the technology and the people who know how to design a hovercraft that, and when I say hovercraft, this isn't like a hovercraft like we had, like from like the 80s, you know, that has like a cushion of air and flies like 6 inches off the ground. These are like planes that they're Harrier jets that can just hover.
Star Wars.
Yeah, they're spaceships basically. Yeah, they fly like they're a Harrier that just can maneuver. I don't know if you know what a Harrier is, but Harriers are the jets that can vertically take off, that have the engines that rotate down, and they have those, but they can just go wherever. They're like the most advanced jet plane thing ever. Well beyond anything, not well beyond. We could kind of do it if we thought it was probably worthwhile, but very advanced technology. They have force fields.
Yeah.
They have force fields. And he's reminiscing about drones?
Yeah, why don't they have drones?
Why wouldn't you have a drone? I
don't know.
They have internet. They're hacking into telecom stuff and like hijacking. Like what? I truly do not understand.
I feel like what we're seeing here is a gap in Suzanne Collins' knowledge base.
Yeah, that is
like
what it feels
I feel like
yeah.
she doesn't quite understand.
Another piece of evidence that she's an Anne Prim, that she wants to living out in the woods. She doesn't understand technology.
I mean, genuinely though, I feel like she doesn't understand like what some of this stuff is exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of techno babble.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, 100%.
And I get like drones, that makes no sense. I get satellites, I guess. I feel like it's conceivable that they could have lost that knowledge of how to like put a
Here's the
satellite up
thing.
into space.
If you can, I disagree, and I could be wrong. So maybe somebody could argue with me. If you can design the hovercrafts and build the hovercrafts that they have in these movies and these books, you can make a rocket and put a satellite in orbit. I'm sorry, you just can. We were putting satellites in orbit in the 60s, in the 50s or whatever. Like it's, come on. We put a satellite in orbit with a freaking calculator. Like you can put, the technology, it drives me crazy. And I think it's just because, and Suzanne Collins is a Luddite, but it's, it's the only thing I can think. All right, let's get to Katie predicting the Hunger Games trilogy.
It's gonna happen, Edward. I've seen it.
So we've got Katie's part 1 predictions for the Mockingjay. You had 5 predictions here, it looks like. Mm-hmm. Let's run through them and see what you got right. Once they're in District 13, Katniss will come across either Bonnie or Twill, but one of them didn't make it. Half right. Both of them
didn't make it. Yeah, I really thought we were gonna get one of them.
Would have made sense. Yeah, I actually think that's a weakness. I think one of them should have made it.
Yeah,
it just feels like a weird loose end. That just like it's just like
why
introduce that and then it just seems like one of them should have made it or both. Yeah, I don't know. I agree. I know this won't be the case, but I really want District 13 to randomly be a Jetsons-esque future utopia. Like without the Capitol, they were able to really develop their tech and thrive. Not exactly. It's the same tech as the Capitol. In fact, less tech, kind of in some ways.
We got more of a dystopia than a utopia.
Yep. Katniss will break out of wanting to just give up upon seeing Prim again. It's not Prim that motivates really, that so much as lots of other events.
Yeah.
But, Katniss's mom will briefly think that Katniss is actually pregnant and be upset with her about it. That does not happen.
No, it doesn't happen.
She's in on the secret. I think. Oh, it is mentioned in the book.
But they just kind of... They say that they're going to spread a rumor that she lost the baby because of the electric shock. Yeah. So they kind of just like brush that whole thing away.
She because I forgot that was your prediction. Isn't there a line in the early part of the book about telling your mom that it was a lie?
I don't think so.
Maybe I'm misremembering.
I don't remember that.
Maybe I'm thinking of this that you wrote and then
maybe.
I don't know. And then your last prediction was the Capitol is going to use PETA in like propaganda, and Katniss will be unable to handle seeing it. Boy, you nailed that one.
I did know that one.
Nailed that one.
Good job, me.
So you got, we'll say 2 out of 5. Not too bad. Not too bad, because the Bonnie and Twill one basically correct. Yours was better. You should have done.
It was an improvement, so we'll count it.
Anyway, so we'll count it. All right, here are Katie's predictions for Mockingjay Part 2.
All right, so I know that Katniss is heading off to District 2 in this second half of the book / second movie. So I am going to predict that when she's in District 2, she will unexpectedly see someone that she knows. I'm thinking like maybe one of the old peacekeepers from District 12 that she was kind of friendly with, and then be thrown off of her game by seeing this familiar face in the midst of battle. Okay. I'm not going to critique your predictions. Yeah, don't critique my predictions.
I just don't know if there are any peacekeepers left that she knows from 12, but that's fair.
Well, okay, we know that one of them became an Avox, but we don't know what happened to the rest of them technically.
True.
My next prediction is that PETA will pretend that he's gotten better, but really he hasn't, and he's going to make another attempt on Katniss's life.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Next prediction, once PETA actually is better, because I'm assuming he'll improve at some point. Maybe I'm wrong on that count, but I'm assuming he'll improve at some point. And once that happens, he and Katniss will get married for real, maybe as like a propaganda thing.
That would make sense. I don't remember.
And my last prediction is that the rebellion will be ultimately successful, but Snow will somehow escape and Katniss will be paranoid about it forever.
Interesting. All right. Those are Katie's predictions for the Mockingjay Part 2. Before we get to our final verdict, we wanted to remind you that you can do us a giant favor by heading over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit, supporting us there for $2, $5, or $15 a month. All of that money supports the show and is very much appreciated. You can also do us a favor by heading over to social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Goodreads. Follow us on all those platforms, and, we post stuff on there, and it's cool and good, and you should follow it. So there. Katie, it's time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
All right, we're going to do something a little different for the first time, maybe?
Yeah,
I don't know.
think we've ever done this before.
I thought there was one where you had like a question mark or something.
I mean, I've had ones where I kind of didn't really choose.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is a little bit different because this is the first time we've done this specifically for a 2-part property.
So here's the thing. We had things we both liked about the movie and things we both liked more about the book. I mean, that's always the case.
Right.
But overall, the movie was, again, a pretty accurate adaptation compared to something like Harry Potter or even Lord of the Rings. These books or these movies are very, very close, like in comparison to those, to the books. And it's super tough to pick one or the other before we get to the story's actual conclusion. So what we're going to do is we're going to not pick one. We're going to wait for now.
I think we're going to wait because, we were working on this earlier. We were talking about it. And I was like, I just don't feel strongly either way right now. Like I don't feel like I have any strong feelings about it.
I will say this one was the closest I've been to picking the movie, and I in fact may, like, it gun to my head, I might pick the movie. Maybe.
I agree with you, actually. This is the first time I've considered picking
like if
the movie.
if you were gonna like nail me down, like you have to pick one, I might pick the movie mainly because it had two of my favorite scenes were complete movie editions, which were the lumberjack scene and the bridge scene at the dam. And apart from that, the movie makes some smart changes, and there's not a ton of major, like, there's nothing majorly bad. Like, the movie doesn't make any, like, major, like, oh, why?
Yeah.
There's a couple little things, but nothing like why would you do that or anything like that. So overall, actually, the movie, I might pick the movie. Like, if you want an answer for this, if you're coming for the answer, I'll say the movie. I'll say it, but we're holding out right. Judgment, mainly for part 2, so that we can get sort of more of a complete.
Yeah, and make a more complete, like, call on this one. And part of where I'm struggling, I think, is that a lot of the changes that were made are things that I feel like I have to see how they play out before I can figure out if I like that change or not.
That was a big thing I talked about earlier with some of the changes to District 13 and Coin and where all that goes, and, like, I don't know how I feel about that yet because I don't know how it ends.
Yeah.
So it's tough to decide.
Like not knowing what the movie is going to do, if anything, with those changes. I just feel very...
It's very hard to give it, to pass a verdict on it. But like I said, that being said, this is by far the one that's the closest and even leaning towards the movie. Although I did enjoy... So just to get back to some of the stuff I've talked about for myself, having watched or read this books before, I did much prefer the first half of this book over my reading it the first time. There were still elements I didn't like of it, and there were still things that I found a little unsatisfying. But overall, I think I enjoyed it a lot more. I appreciate what Collins is going for more than I did when I was 20 or whatever, when I read this the first time. Or I was probably like 21 or 22. I don't know. Whatever. I was in my early 20s. When I read it the first time, it was 10 years ago. So I did enjoy it more. But I thought the movie did a really good job. And just, we'll see. We'll see when we get to part 2. So... there you go. Sorry, that's what's happening.
But please do. We are going to be putting up our usual poll. So if you want to talk about if you have a preference between book and movie for this one, or maybe you agree with us and want to talk about that as well, we will be doing our usual polls. Please reply to them quickly because we're doing the prequel episode immediately. Like right away.
Yeah. Yep. So you'll probably post those polls on like Wednesday or Thursday.
Probably Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, and then we're gonna record like Saturday, so you got a couple days.
So if you want to weigh in, get it out there.
Yeah, or we might even record Friday. Whatever. We're going to record very quickly after the polls go up, so get on it quick. Katie, what's up next? They already know, but just say it anyways.
Up next, we have The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2.
The conclusion. We're wrapping this whole thing up, and we'll finally know how this thing... I'm so excited, because again, I remember so little about how it ends. I'm so excited to finally remember and see what it is I didn't like and see if I like it more, because we're so close. I'm like 130 pages away from the end of the book.
I can taste it.
We're
almost closing out
there.
the summer series.
So close. That's going to do it for this week. We'll see you in exactly 1 week's time for the finale of our summer series and the finale of the Hunger Games. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else.
Keep reading books.
Keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.